Chapter 1. Dirty water flowed and plaque raged. In the depths of an abandoned prison, a cluster of cells wrapped in a plasma membrane was separated from the surface of a cork. The cell cluster was only the size of a human index finger. Its macroscopic appearance was like a cluster of white snot. This cluster of cells seemed to have independent thinking and the ability to act. However, due to the imperfection of the nervous system, there were no five senses. However, when the cell cluster came into contact with foreign objects, it could obtain the basic information of the object through a special method of intercellular signal transmission. The separated cells did not stay for long and began to move. Transcription and translation. Production of actin. The finger-sized group of cells began to migrate very slowly, about the same speed as a snail. No, it's not perfect and it's not what I want. The cell cluster seemed to have abandoned this seemingly complete and strong body and continued to search in the prison. If there was a torch to provide illumination, you would find that in this huge prison cell, there were hundreds of bodies abandoned by the cell cluster. The cell cluster was not formed on its own. It had its own name, Han Dong. The overseas Chinese, an associate professor at the University of Florence in Italy's Faculty of Life Sciences. He was 31 years old before he became this cluster of cells. He died of lung cancer on a hospital bed in Florence's Central Hospital on July 21, 2018. The ward was filled with flowers, but these flowers came from his students, not his family. At the moment of death, the pain of the illness dissipated. Han Dong felt relieved. He did not rise to heaven or fall to hell. He did not drink Granny Meng's soup, walk on the bridge of helplessness, or experience the so-called reincarnation. What greeted him was only endless darkness. However, his consciousness always existed during this process. Am I dead or not? After a person dies, the brain will continue to be active for 5 minutes. But I've been dead for an hour, right? Han Dong's sense of time was extremely strong. He, who was conscious, knew very well how long he had been dead. Han Dong slowly tried to sense his body. Unexpectedly, the image of the cell cluster appeared in his consciousness. There were only two things that could be done. First, he could sense the detailed information of the objects he came into contact with through intercellular signal transmission. Secondly, by producing actin, the ability to exercise was produced. Just as Han Dong was synthesizing actin for the first time in its cells and carrying out related activities, a series of system notifications reverberated in its mind. Please choose a suitable body in the prison. The current maximum weight is 100. If you are not satisfied with the chosen body, you can send the body to the processing room for cell separation. You are not allowed to move or transfer the bodies of other prisoners when you are not in a cellular state. The notification ended. In Han Dong's consciousness, another floor plan of the prison was generated. Monolayer structure. There were a total of 204 cells. Through the light spots and annotations, the corresponding prisoners in each cell were marked on the floor plan, and the words dead were annotated. Other than that, there was a room marked in red in the middle of the prison. It was called Management Room, and was locked. The room Han Dong was currently in was the processing room. Foreign prison? Rebirth after death? What the hell am I? These questions didn't bother Han Dong for too long. He had been at the forefront of science for a long time, and his ability to accept new things was extremely strong. In a short time, he realized that he was an independent group of cells with a protective membrane. Although he didn't know how a group of cells could survive independently and carry consciousness, cells were the basic unit of life, and it was enough to prove that he wasn't dead yet. The so-called death transmigration happened to me? Moreover, I transmigrated into a group of cells? How ironic. Han Dong had devoted his life to the study of cell biology. Half a year ago, He published an article on the role of activating and controlling cell regulation through genetic coding in the top international journal, Cell. Han Dong, who was promoted to associate professor because of this article, was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer in the physical examination of all the teachers in the university. He was ruthlessly eroded by cancer cells, and his future was ruined. He, who should have died completely with the disappearance of his consciousness, was reborn in the form of a cell cluster. Without much hesitation, considering that the cell cluster also needed energy to function normally, the most important thing was to follow the instructions of the mysterious system to find a suitable body. According to the instructions on the map, Han Dong used an extremely slow crawl method to go to the nearest cell. It took him an entire day to migrate, which was almost the same as a snail's migration. Matching the map in his consciousness, corresponding to the small light spot that symbolized himself, he moved to the next cell with the shortest path. For the first time, he came into contact with the prisoner's corpse in the prison. Fortunately, there are instructions on the map. Otherwise, it would be really troublesome if I completely lost my 5 senses the moment he came into contact with the corpse. At the level of Han Dong's consciousness, a complete cross-section of the human body immediately appeared. At the same time, it was also accompanied by detailed text annotations that could be checked at the level of consciousness. Campbell Frank, underground boxer before his death. Head inferior, weight requirement. 5 left arm, normal, weight requirement. 11 right arm good with the quick punch skill, weight requirement. 23 torso, normal, weight requirement. 13 left foot, normal, weight requirement. 11 right foot, normal, weight requirement. 14 A series of data information was fed back to Han Dong's consciousness. The prisoner seems to have undergone special treatment before his death, so that the corpse won't rot and can be occupied and controlled by me. The previous notification said that if I'm not satisfied with the body, I can abandon it in the treatment room and choose a new one. There are still many bodies to choose from. It's necessary to use one of them to understand the current situation. Please confirm if you want to obtain the entire body of Campbell Frank? Weight requirement 77. Yes. In the blink of an eye, the cell cluster entered the body through the holes on the surface of the prisoner's body, activating the whole body in a short period of time and restoring vitality. First, a ringing sound echoed in his mind. Immediately after, a cold stone feeling came from all parts of his body, indicating that the nervous system was all connected. A simple cell made of black rock and steel came into view. His vision was restored. Just as Han Dong was about to investigate and analyze the mysterious prison to deduce why he was reborn and what kind of secrets the mysterious prison hid, he was suddenly stunned. Han Dong supported himself with one hand on the wall, gritted his teeth, and roared angrily. Wow! This guy is a retard. After completely occupying Campbell Frank, Han Dong did not feel good. Due to the recovery of his 5 senses, he was able to obtain information about the surrounding environment. When he was about to take the next step and use his brain to carry out complex data processing, there was a big problem. Han Dong's consciousness was the youngest associate professor in the Life Sciences Academy of a well-known university. He was a top student. However, consciousness was consciousness. When his consciousness collected data through his senses, simulated the relevant processing formula, and wanted to pass it to his brain for processing, there was a big problem. It was like buying a Prodigal i2080 Ti graphics card. However, such a top-notch graphics card was installed in a mainframe with an old version of the i3 processor. The bigger problem was that the processor had been flooded. Due to the introduction of a large amount of data, the system was on the verge of collapse. Han Dong could only close his eyes and recite the Great Compassion mantra to reduce the absorption of external information as much as possible and empty his mind as much as possible. Otherwise, this retard's brain would definitely crash or even burn due to the introduction of a large amount of data. Chapter 2. It's no wonder that the brain is of inferior quality and requires a small weight. I have to find a suitable body before I consider leaving the prison. Han Dong wasn't in a hurry to give up this retarded body. It still had some value. He shifted his attention to his right arm. There were two peculiar parts of Campbell Frank's body. One was his head and the other was his right arm. However, the peculiar description of his right arm was a compliment. In the description at the level of consciousness, it was given an excellent evaluation and also had the skill of quick punch. As a university professor, Han Dong was immersed in the laboratory all day and had no time to play games. However, in junior high school, he still played online games such as Legend and World of Warcraft, so he had a certain understanding of this. Let's give it a try. He punched with his right arm. Whoosh! The sound of wind breaking brushed past his ears, and there were even some fist shadows in the air. What a fast punching speed! Although Han Dong was a researcher, he had also applied for a fitness card in private. He could understand that this punching speed was probably comparable to that of an international first-class boxer. Let's test the strength of my fist. Since it wasn't his own body, Han Dong had no mercy at all. He punched the prison wall with all his might. But drip, 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 his flesh was scraped, and blood dripped along his fist. There was a 1-centimeter dent in the thick black stone wall. Let's not talk about the strength of the black stone first. Han Dong speculated that the strength of this person's right fist was probably infinitely close to the human limit. I can't think anymore. I have to quickly change to a body with a normal brain. After roughly understanding the situation of the body, Han Dong tried his best to empty his mind and returned to the processing room to avoid overburdening his brain. During this period, Han Dong didn't dare to look at the overall size of the prison. He walked with his head lowered. Han Dong didn't dare to act recklessly. If a physical death occurred outside the processing room, he couldn't guarantee that he would survive. Back in the processing room, Han Dong, who slowly raised his head, was immediately shocked by the scene in front of him. The so-called processing room was different from an ordinary prison cell. The space was about 20 times the size of an ordinary prison cell. It was actually a biological laboratory. When the culture medium on the table came into Han Dong's eyes, he subconsciously collected data and analyzed it. It's over. But a strange explosion resounded in the processing room. He lost all his 5 senses. You have abandoned your physical body in the processing room. Please continue to search for a suitable physical body. This retard, Han Dong, who had returned to the cell cluster, felt helpless. However, this also confirmed one thing. As long as he was in the processing room, no matter what happened to his body, he would not be in any danger. After I find a physical body, I'll definitely have to leave the prison and head to the outside world. In a situation where I'm not sure if the outside world is dangerous, I have to do my best to find a physical body that's strong enough and suitable for me. At least my brain can keep up with my consciousness. After roughly understanding some of the current settings and the general situation of the prison, Han Dong continued on his journey to find a physical body. 7 years. That was right. In order to find a suitable body, he had searched for 7 years. As a university professor, he had developed a pursuit of perfection through all kinds of precision experiments and thesis writing. 7 years, 3 months, and 12 days. In a solitary cell about 500 meters away from the processing room, Gerard Meridis, a devout believer in life. This was the 139th corpse that Han Dong had come into contact with. Head excellent with the skill holy light sensing, weight requirement. 37 left arm, normal weight requirement. 12 right arm, normal weight requirement. 14 a torso, inferior weight requirement. 33 to left foot incomplete weight requirement. 0 right foot incomplete weight requirement. 0 Finally, I've found a corpse with an excellent head. It's strange that a torso with an inferior rating requires 33 points of weight. The intuition of a researcher was very accurate. The cell cluster slowly occupied the body. At the moment when the facial features were restored, Han Dong was slightly moved. This lady named Gerard Meridas must have been inhumanely treated in her life. In addition, the question of why a torso with an inferior rating could reach 33 points of weight was also solved. Because the brain's nervous system was fully activated, Han Dong could clearly feel the cramping pain coming from the lady's stomach. She must have swallowed some foreign object that could not be digested when she was alive. In addition, although the lady's head was rated as excellent, but Han Dong still felt that his analytical thinking was hindered to a certain extent. The female believer's brain is biased towards art and literature, which seems to be not quite compatible with me as a scientist. There are still some gaps in information processing and computing ability, and it will obviously be hindered when thinking about problems. Let's go to the processing room to check the abdomen first. Returning to the processing room, Han Dong immediately found a clean scalpel. Because the death of the body did not have much impact on Han Dong, after a while of operation, a key with sticky gastric juice in his hand was in his hand. The key to the secret room in the center of the prison? The only locked room in the prison was the management room in the middle. When he obtained the key, he naturally linked the two together, but he was not completely sure. At this time, Han Dong activated the ability of his head, holy light sensing. Consuming a certain amount of mental power caused Han Dong to feel slightly tired. Immediately after, a mass of holy light descended on the abdominal incision. Under the warm holy light, the wound healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In 7 years of prison exploration, Han Dong had seen a lot of similar strange magic. Due to the limitations of his brain, he was unable to analyze and understand it in detail from a scientific level. After his body recovered, Han Dong immediately crawled to the center of the prison. For some reason, Han Dong was a little excited and eager to know what was hidden in the room in the center of the prison, since every cell and every prisoner has a detailed setting and meaning. Then, the locked prison management room is no exception. Click. The key successfully unlocked the door. In his consciousness, the management room, which was originally marked in red, switched to a gray state. Will there be a perfect body inside? After standing at the door and observing for a while, he confirmed that there was no danger inside, and there were no signs related to no entry. Han Dong supported his upper body with his hands and stepped in. The management room has been opened. You can now perform body separation in the management room. Han Dong immediately began to inspect the secret room. In the spacious steel room, there was only a thick black metal table. The surrounding walls were covered with drawings about the design of the prison and information about some special prisoners. After a round of inspection, first of all, no complete body was found. Only a head stored in a glass hydraulic tank was found. The reason why it was strange was that this head had neither facial features nor hair. It was more like a boiled ostrich egg. Second, there were also a lot of research documents in the room. Most of them were in a damaged state, or the key words had been blacked out. The information is seriously lacking. It is impossible to infer the origin and nature of the prison. However, the purpose of the prison's construction can be vaguely seen. It seems to be to hold all the special prisoners in this area of Europe here for cell-level research. It seems that a sudden incident caused the prison to become like this. Sigh. The brain of this liberal arts student is fast at reading words, and can even quickly fill in the metaphors behind the words. But once this brain needs to be used for calculation and analysis, it is a little slow. Once his thinking was limited, Han Dong would feel quite uncomfortable. In the past 7 years, he hadn't been able to find a decent head. Temporarily putting aside the inference about the nature of the prison, Han Dong tried to find the hidden information in this room, especially information about the mysterious head. With his keen and careful observation, Han Dong found a hidden button on the leg of the iron table. A complete document rose from the table. What is this? Subspace Containment Measures, Prison Edition? Chapter 3. When the mysterious scientific research article appeared, Han Dong was immediately immersed in it. When Han Dong was still in school, his highest record was to read 20 short and medium SCI papers in one day. But this time it was a bit uncomfortable. It was not a problem with his brain, but Han Dong could not understand some of the knowledge described in the article. Quantum physics involves the use of the fourth dimension, intervening in the quantum field through subjective consciousness, through the human brain as a carrier, subjectively affect and regulate the quantized space. Wow, this cross-disciplinary literature reading is really terrible. There were specializations in the field. Han Dong's level of physics stopped at the undergraduate level. If the hypothesis in this article is correct, I am afraid it will cause a revolutionary storm in the field of physics when I bring it back to my world. However, this article also contains the magic principles of this world, and I can't understand the strange text in the last few pages. In other words, this technology can only be implemented in this world. Don't think about it, my head hurts. In short, the so-called subspace containment technology has been gathered in this head. Han Dong turned his head to look at the head in the hydraulic tank. Through the operation method recorded in the literature, he opened the tank and reached out to touch the smooth head. Anonymous, identity unknown during life. Faceless head. Modified product, has the ability to imitate and portable prison. Weight requirement, 100-inch full load value. This head is not only integrated with the quantum space, but also has the ability to change appearance. Moreover, the description is slightly different from the other bodies in the prison. Should I choose the complete body of the prisoner or choose the head alone? It's decided. The upper body of the female believer instantly lost its vitality and collapsed on the table. Grumble. A group of cells drilled out of the mouth and slowly crawled to the smooth and round faceless head. Faceless head, modified product. Its weight requirement is 100. Once occupied, no other body can be chosen. Do you want to occupy it? Yes. Very decisive. However, this time the body was completely different from the previous one. The time to accept the head was very long. 1 minute. 1 hour. 10 hours. During this process, Han Dong's consciousness was in a stagnant state, where it was connected to his brain. An unknown amount of time passed. By the time he woke up and opened his eyes, the scene in front of him had completely changed. The cold wind blew into Han Dong's ears. Night, full moon, stars. Soil, needles, and jungles. The original prison no longer existed, and Han Dong landed in a coniferous forest in the form of a head. Because the choice of the body was completed, the prison automatically disappeared. At this moment, the familiar system's voice sounded. The selection of the body has been completed. Due to the host's incompleteness, the ability of a faceless head cannot be activated for the time being. Please find a complete human body as soon as possible. Note: the current weight has reached 100%. Unable to occupy the body of a special individual. Please choose an ordinary person whose physical fitness is lower than the average to occupy the body. This occupation will not increase the load. After obtaining the relevant information, Han Dong tried to move. When his brain issued the command to move, an itchy feeling spread from his neck. Looking down, thick mycelium, tentacle-like, grew out of the neck and carried the head to move quickly. The fastest it could reach was the running speed of a normal person. Not long after Han Dong started his activity. Thud, 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 thud. The sound of a horse's hooves broke the silence of the forest. With the help of the moonlight, Han Dong could clearly see a scientific product that was different from his own worldview was galloping through the forest. A carriage, but it was a combination of steam technology and brass metal. The horse's limbs were replaced by a copper steam piston device that could provide sufficient power. With the precision of the gear structure, it perfectly replicated the running pattern of the horse's leg. The perfect streamlined metal design made running more natural and stable. As for the horse's body and head, it was intact, and the surface was inlaid with a different colored metal armor. The specific type of metal the armor was made of couldn't be identified by the naked eye. 2 bronze horses pulled a closed brass carriage. A large amount of steam constantly overflowed from the neatly arranged pipes on the edge of the carriage, indicating that the current carriage was in a state of full speed. Steam carriage? Galloping through the forest at full speed, is there something chasing them? Han Dong quietly lurked in the grass, the tentacles on his neck all retracted. Holding his breath, he waited for the carriage to pass. However, crack! The metal side door opened, and a human wrapped in a black cloak and a mask grabbed the head from the grass. One had to know that the carriage was moving at a speed of 80 kilometers per hour. The person on the carriage directly locked onto a head hidden in the dark forest. His movements were smooth. The moment the head was brought into the carriage, he threw it into a linen bag. A rotten smell filled Han Dong's nose. There were 2 smelly corpses in the linen bag. However, Han Dong, who had been in the smelly rat culture room for many years and had taken over nearly 10,000 dissections of white mice, had a calm expression in the face of such a smell. He pretended to be a corpse and eavesdropped on the situation outside. He said in standard British English, "Denise, do you know how dangerous your actions were just now? There are mutants among the individuals chasing us." This was followed by an elegant and firm female voice. "Even if it's a head, we can't give them a chance to eat. You're too stubborn. Your recklessness will one day make you a member of the corpse bag. Strange, although the holy city is close to us, how did this head come about? If it's a timid fellow who sneaks out of the holy city, either his corpse will be destroyed or his corpse will be intact. There shouldn't be only a head left, right? There's a need to check." Han Dong, who was in the corpse bag, was shocked. Although they were humans, if they discovered that Han Dong existed in the form of a living head, things would be troublesome. If it was in Han Dong's world when he was alive, his fate would be to be sent to the Academy of Sciences for research. He could neither live nor die. Even in a parallel world, the outcome should be similar. The corpse bag opened, and a pair of eyes stared straight at Han Dong's head through the mask. At this moment, boom! The carriage suffered a violent impact and the corpse bag closed. They can actually catch up to the steam carriage, using bronze bullets to counterattack. We're not far from the holy city. The number of bullets should be able to last until we enter the city. Da-da-da! The deafening sound of machine gun fire could be heard. Han Dong, who was in the corpse bag, breathed a sigh of relief. At the crucial moment, it was the so-called mutant that helped him resolve the danger. After gradually adapting to the sound of gunfire, Han Dong, who had calmed down, became curious about the world he transmigrated to because of the conversation between these people. What was a mutant? Some kind of monster? The holy city? Why hadn't he heard of it before? Was it a country derived from a parallel world? There's too little information. I can't deduce anything. Once we reach the holy city, I have to find a way to leave the carriage. After leaving this group of people, I'll slowly explore and understand this world. It's best if the pursuing monster can destroy part of the carriage. Just as Han Dong thought of this, he heard a creak sound. It seemed that the metal sheet of the carriage had been cut open by something sharp. "Hurry up and send the signal. Tell the trash guarding the city to open the door for us." "Yes." A firework shot out from the roof of the carriage. Immediately after, Han Dong could hear the loud sound of a heavy door opening. About 5 minutes later, the machine gun stopped firing and the carriage slowed down. "Have we entered the city?" Prepare to leave the carriage. Han Dong could roughly guess the situation outside. The group of people who had escaped the pursuit of the monster were in a relaxed state, both physically and mentally. Before the city gate closed, these people would definitely keep an eye on the situation outside the city gate. Their attention would not be diverted. Using the mycelium at the neck, he slowly pried open the corpse bag. The tear on the side of the carriage was large enough for Han Dong's head to pass through. Wait! Han Dong was waiting for the best opportunity where he would not be discovered. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the moment the city gate closed, the sound drowned out everything around him. A head flew out from the side of the carriage and quickly crawled into a dark alley the moment it landed. He listened to the sound of metal hooves that did not stop. In the dark alley, Han Dong smiled and continued to look for suitable bodies for ordinary people. Chapter 4. What Han Dong didn't know was that, even though they had successfully escaped back to the Holy City, the people in the carriage weren't in a good condition. This was because when they were fleeing, they had seen the appearance of the monster chasing after them at a close distance. Even though they were wearing goggles, there were still some strange dark patterns around their eyes. They didn't have time to care about the body bags now. They went to the chapel at full speed for a week of pressure-lowering activities. In a gloomy and damp dark alley, a human head was moving slowly inside. The architectural style is similar to that of Europe in the 19th century, but the giant city walls that are hundreds of meters high and the tall buildings in the city are not in line with that era. In addition, there are magic powers and strange creatures that I don't understand in this world. They are also important factors that affect the development of science. What Han Dong had seen so far was just the tip of the iceberg of this world. His inference might not be correct. However, Han Dong would be excited by these novel things. He would even go crazy. He was eager to understand this world and the scientific system here. The most important thing now is to find an ordinary person's body and slowly understand it from the bottom. Of course, I have to find a way to return to my original world. In fact, in Han Dong's case, in his original world, there was nothing worth worrying about except for a few National Nature Fund projects that had not been completed. When he was a child, his parents passed away, and he was raised by his grandfather. When he completed his doctoral defense, his grandfather passed away peacefully. In addition, the research project required him to accompany him day and night. In addition, the circle in the academy was too small. Han Dong didn't have a so-called lover. He still remembered that the bouquets of flowers in the ward were all sent by the student. But he didn't like to deal with the students. If it weren't for the forced arrangement of the school, he would have spent all his time in class on cytology research. Without any worries, he died in the torture of the cancer demon. After confirming that he had been reborn, Han Dong's first reaction wasn't to find a way to return to his original world. Instead, he was excited to come to a new world full of unknowns. They wanted to explore and research. Currently, he was near the city wall. The residential area belonged to the commoners. In order to increase the land utilization rate, it was densely packed with apartment buildings that could accommodate a large number of commoners. The materials used were mainly red bricks, and they were matched with copper sheets, a vaulted design, and mostly diamond-shaped glass inlaid windows, due to the adhesion of the mycelial tentacles. Han Dong's head could easily crawl on the vertical wall and observe the situation inside the room through the window. After a period of observation, there was a very big doubt. That's strange. Why are most of them middle-aged and elderly people, or children under the age of 10? Why aren't the young people at home? Is it possible that all the young people have been forcibly conscripted? According to what I know, the humans in the Holy City seem to be under the threat of a monster and can only stay within the city walls. It's very likely that the commoner youth will be forcibly conscripted, but what about the rich families? Han Dong planned to use the night to get closer to the inner part of the city and head to the luxurious houses of the rich to find his target. If he could directly become a rich man's son through physical possession, it would save him a lot of trouble. But there was also a certain risk in this. The soldiers he met on the way back to the city could discover Han Dong lurking in the grass at a glance during high-speed travel. If he met such people again in the city, he was likely to be discovered again. He must find a physical body as soon as possible. Just as Han Dong escaped from the dark alley and tried to move secretly, he suddenly found something. Between the rows of buildings, there was an extra open space due to a design problem. This open space happened to be located at the back of the surrounding buildings. It could only be reached through the dark alley filled with dirty water and rats and insects. Therefore, almost no one would come here. In the middle of the open space overgrown with weeds, there was a relatively large oak tree with a large number of branches. As luck would have it, on one of the thick branches of the oak tree, a young man happened to be hanging. Sticking to the shadow, Han Dong's head slowly moved to the lower end of the body to observe closely. The young man had no signs of life. His fluffy brown hair matched with a pair of beautiful sea blue eyes. Due to the pain of suffocation, his eyes were bloodshot and bulging outwards. He was wearing a rough and simple linen shirt and a pair of linen trousers that were slightly too big for him. His leather shoes were stained with mud. One of the leather shoes fell off due to the pain, only the other leather shoe was still on his feet. Han Dong also noticed that the young man seemed to be wearing some kind of black bracelet on his wrist. His age is between 16 to 20 years old. There are no calluses on his hands. At least, it means that the young man should not have engaged in any physical work. His yellowish and thin body is obviously caused by the lack of foreign amino acids. Is he from a poor family that can't even provide for basic food and clothing? Occupying such a body may be a little troublesome in the future. But this is also the safest way. Han Dong suddenly closed his eyes. Based on the information obtained so far, he made a comprehensive analysis from the perspective of fundamental interests and safety. Finally, he made a decision. In a world full of unknown dangers, safety was the best way to do things. It was such a precious opportunity to be reborn. Moreover, Han Dong spent a whole 7 years in prison to find this unique head. In a situation where he was unfamiliar with the holy city and the perception of the internal guards to a certain extent exceeded that of ordinary people, it was not worth the risk. According to the setting of the weight value, there should be a way to increase the upper limit of the weight value. When the time comes, I'll choose a better body. For now, temporarily borrowing this civilian's body can, to a certain extent, save me some trouble of being exposed. He climbed onto the corpse. The moment the head touched the corpse's skin, similar to the situation in prison, the relevant information about the corpse immediately appeared in Han Dong's consciousness. Warren Nicholas, dead, no disease. Physical fitness lower than average of ordinary people. Do you want to occupy? Yes. The skin touched. The tentacles that were as long as Han Dong's neck drilled into the young man's body from all the holes on the surface and occupied the whole body. Vital signs activated. He took off the hemp rope around his neck. Plop! The soles of his feet were only 1 meter away from the ground. However, landing from such a height made Han Dong lose his balance and lean forward, almost falling to the ground. Isn't this physical fitness too weak? This body was completely incomparable to the body in prison. Han Dong still remembered the first retarded body he occupied. The speed and power of his punches were really comfortable. However, this young man's punches were soft and powerless. If he had hit a slightly harder object, it was very likely that his entire arm would have been broken. Beep, beep, beep. Suddenly, the clockwork bracelet on his wrist vibrated slightly. The precise clockwork timer displayed a numerical message. A 1-hour countdown? Intuition told Han Dong that the young man's suicide might not be due to family or personal reasons, but was related to the clockwork bracelet's countdown. Chapter 5. The ability related to Faceless Head has been activated. Han Dong pondered. The abilities of the head are imitation and portable prison. The first ability is easy to understand, which is equivalent to disguise. Previously, after Han Dong seized the head, he automatically changed into Han Dong's appearance according to his subconscious. After occupying the body, he also perfectly imitated the appearance of the youth. The second ability, is it a combination of quantum technology and some kind of magical means? When the body was successfully occupied, an iron door appeared in Han Dong's consciousness. When he tried to touch the iron door through his consciousness, buzz. The ringing sound was accompanied by a brief emptiness of consciousness. When he opened his eyes again, Han Dong was already in a small, gloomy and dark prison. It was a real prison, not a simple image of consciousness. The prison was small, consisting of only a corridor, a cell, and a secret room. It was completely different from the previous prison where he searched for the body. Excluding the secret room, the overall area was less than 30 square meters. This is the so-called subspace containment technology? The internal space formed through the intervention of the brain's subjective consciousness. It's amazing. The aisle was ordinary, there was nothing noteworthy. Han Dong first stepped into the side of the prison cell sealed by iron bars and immediately found a strange thing. At first glance, the cell seemed to be made of ordinary black stone material. If you look carefully, you will find some tentacles floating between the gaps of these black stone blocks. Previously, when I relied on the head to move, similar tentacles grew on the neck, but the shape was more similar to mycelium. But these tentacles in the cell are different. Wherever there is a gap, you can see dark tentacles squirming back and forth. Staring for a long time will make Han Dong very uncomfortable. At this moment, a prompt came. Faceless prison individual compatibility. Perfect, the individual can perfectly control the prison and will not suffer from overuse. Size, extremely small, the number of creatures that can be stored. 1. Upgrading Faceless Head will increase the size of the prison. Usage, when the target life form falls into a weak state, contact it and activate the portable prison, then it can be stored. Note 1. After Faceless One's head is upgraded, the weight requirement will increase. Please reserve at least 50 points of weight in advance. Otherwise, the upgrade will fail. 2. Please do not try to contain a creature in good condition. If you fail, it will cause great damage to the body and the prison will be damaged. 3. Under special circumstances or when the host is being attacked by other creatures, the host will not be able to teleport to the portable prison. Faceless One's prison? Can it contain life forms? The first thing that came to Han Dong's mind was the mutant that was chasing after the metal carriage in this world. As for taking in normal humans, Han Dong wouldn't even consider it. Taking in humans was a crime, and it also crossed Han Dong's bottom line. If he could really house a mutant or a magical creature, he would be able to conduct biological research. Han Dong temporarily left the cell that made his hair stand on end and went to the secret room next door. The room was completely sealed. Through the cracks in the outer layer of the black stone, one could even see the white metal wall inside. The main door of the secret room was sealed by a heavy iron door, which needed to be opened by turning the hydraulic valve on the door. Han Dong thought that it would be difficult to turn the valve with such a weak body. Who knew, when his palm fell on the surface of the disc-shaped valve, it seemed to recognize Han Dong's biological information, and the valve turned by itself. Creak. The heavy metal door also opened to the outside. The moment he stepped into the secret room, the sense of danger and depression brought by the prison itself instantly disappeared. He opened a curtain of antibacterial film and passed through a narrow buffer room. A sterile laboratory that Han Dong was very familiar with appeared in front of him. clean white walls, temperature and humidity, adjustable light intensity. This was in sharp contrast to the prison outside. However, compared to the laboratory that Han Dong used before his death, this sterile room was relatively small, and the equipment was not so complete. Inside, there was only a clean workbench against the wall and an exhibition stand in the center of the room. The former was used for bacteria inoculation experiment. In the latter's glass cabinet there was a special syringe. Why is there a sterile laboratory in the prison? Could it be related to the cell cluster? Bypassing the exhibition stand, Han Dong came to the clean workbench first. He accidentally found the cell cluster inhabiting in the petri dish. It was about the size of a finger, which was the sign of Han Dong when he was reborn. Intuition told him that if this cluster of cells died, he would be buried together with it. Just as Han Dong touched the workbench, a prompt sounded frowny face when killing a specific life form. The cell essence can be extracted through the dead body syringe. The collected cell essence can be injected into the cell main body through a septic operation. The weight limit will be increased according to the quality and quantity of the cell essence. Please note 1. The dead body syringe can be used at will. It doesn't matter if it is damaged. 2. The dead body syringe can only be used on special creatures that have been dead for less than 5 minutes. For living creatures or corpses that have been dead for too long, the cell essence cannot be extracted. 3. One corpse can only be extracted once. After hearing the prompt, Han Dong quickly turned his head to look at the exquisite syringe in the exhibition stand. Transparent transistors, brass needles, and metal rims. This is the way to increase the weight limit of the cells. Han Dong was very excited. A problem that troubled him was solved. Next, he only needed to determine what a special life form was. As long as he could increase the weight limit, Han Dong would be able to control a stronger body. My understanding of this world is still too little. That's all I know about the portable prison for the time being. Han Dong returned to the corridor. When he pushed open the prison exit door, he returned to the bottom of the giant oak tree in the blink of an eye. There was no one around. Han Dong tried to take out the syringe. Sure enough, as his consciousness transmitted the thought of take, a sophisticated copper-shell syringe appeared directly in his palm. As his consciousness transmitted the thought of take back, the syringe automatically went under the skin. This process made Han Dong's palm slightly numb. There are still many secrets in the prison. Let's leave it at that for the time being. First, I have to deal with this young man. The basic family relationship related to him must be figured out. And the reason for his suicide is related to the clockwork device that is counting down on his wrist. Han Dong's train of thought was very clear. Seizing the body was the simplest step. The next step was to familiarize and adapt to his living environment. He couldn't let anyone discover that Warren Nicholas had changed into a different person. Moreover, the countdown of the clockwork bracelet made Han Dong very uneasy. Chapter 6. Brother, where did you go? Why didn't you go home? Just as Han Dong quickly walked out of the dark alley and was about to ask the passers-by about the situation, a sweet and soft girl's voice came from beside him. Han Dong's brain reacted very quickly. In his mind, he had already imagined a cute blonde girl in a lace tutu dress standing next to him. From her words, it was naturally Nicholas's sister. Just as Han Dong turned his head, the situation was completely different from what he had imagined. Compared to his thin and weak body, the girl looked much healthier. However, due to the lack of vitamins, her skin was slightly yellow. She should be around 15 years old. She did not have the wavy blonde hair that he had imagined. Instead, she had the same short brown hair and a pair of aquamarine eyes as Han Dong. The girl wore rather crude copper goggles, denim overalls, and a tool bag on the side. She really looked like a young craftsman. In addition, the girl was holding a bag of fragrant food tightly in her hands. She held it in her arms like a treasure, afraid that it would be snatched away by others. I came out to get some fresh air. Because there's not much time left. Han Dong was an associate professor at an Italian university when he was alive. Fluent English was a daily basis. In addition, Han Dong's words were very interesting. He deliberately mentioned the time problem and waved his bracelet in front of the girl. Unexpectedly, this action made the girl's eyes wet. She hugged Han Dong from the side. "Brother, you won't die. Nina believes that you will definitely become a returnee and return home alive." Nina. He knew his sister's name. However, compared to his sister's name, Han Dong was more concerned about the countdown and the mention of the term returnee. The reason why this cowardly young man chose to commit suicide was most likely related to the countdown. What could force a person to give up on life in despair? Han Dong was very curious. "Yes, I will return alive. Of course, I'm still a little nervous, so I came out to relax." "Nina, don't worry. Nothing will happen." Han Dong tried his best to pretend to be sunny and confident. After all, it was very troublesome for a girl to cry. Nina moved her goggles up, wiped her wet eyes, and took out the food that she had prepared for a long time. "Yes. Here are the fish, chips, and cabbage sandwiches Mom made for you. Brother, eat while you go to the ceremony square. Try to be there 15 minutes earlier." "All right." Han Dong made a mental note of the location of the ceremony square. It seemed that he had to get there before the clockwork mechanism finished its countdown. Otherwise, something terrible would happen. On the way to the square, Han Dong did not care about his image as he was too hungry. Every bite was quite extravagant, at least including a whole fried fish and fries. If you feel that it's too oily, take a bite of the vegetable sandwich to balance it out. Due to the country and family's financial situation, Walloon's family might not be able to eat such food even once a year. Therefore, Nina treated the food as if it was a treasure and hugged it tightly the whole time. However, Nina, who was next to them, almost burst into tears when she saw Han Dong's reckless way of eating and the aroma of the fish and chips. Han Dong looked helpless. He had not eaten any human food for 7 years. To be honest, he was not willing to share with his sister. Considering that their sibling relationship might come in handy in the future, he also needed to get some information about the holy city from Nina. Han Dongkai took out a small piece of fried fish and handed it over. "I'm not hungry." Seeing the piece of fried fish that Han Dong handed to her, Nina licked the saliva off the corner of her mouth and said unconvincingly, "After all, this might be Han Dong's last meal." Nina knew very well how dangerous her brother was going to be. "Take it, I'm full." "Okay, thank you, brother." Nina took the piece of fried fish and wanted to put the whole piece into her mouth like Han Dong. But she felt that it was too extravagant, so she ate it slowly, bite by bite. Every time she took a bite, she would sneak a glance at Han Dong shyly. After nearly half an hour of brisk walking, they finally arrived at the ceremony square. It was huge. Han Dong had never seen such a huge square before, and there were more than 10,000 people gathered inside. At a glance, at least half of them were wearing wind-up bracelets similar to Han Dong's, and most of them were teenagers. This also explained why Han Dong did not see any teenagers in civilian buildings. 20 minutes left. Why do I have a bad feeling about this? A large-scale sacrificial ceremony? The first thing that came to Han Dong's mind was the sacrificial ceremony. However, on second thought, it was not very likely. Sacrificing thousands of teenagers, who symbolized the future strength of the country, at one time, unless this country did not want to continue. Moreover, according to his sister Nina, he might not necessarily die. It was just that the probability of death was very high. "Nina, you can leave me here. Don't worry, I'll come back alive." "Well, whether you're my brother or not, I'll wait for you." Han Dong was a little surprised by his words. Nina, who had run away, stuck out her tongue and waved goodbye to him. At the same time, the familiar sound of metal hooves came. However, this time, It was not a carriage but a group of black-clothed knights riding on mechanical horses. There were a total of 30 of them. Han Dong vaguely felt that the aura of these 30 people could suppress the tens of thousands of civilians in the square. Black Rose Knights. The people in the square could not help but shout this noble and awe-inspiring name. They were the backbone of this country. They were the true hope of mankind. The black rose badge was a symbol of their status. The black iron armor they wore seemed heavy, but it was actually light and fitting. The knights did not wear helmet. Instead, they wore a black iron mask that was fused with the element of goggles. This made Han Dong very curious. The group of people in the carriage before also wore similar goggles. It seemed like the item goggles had a special meaning in this world. It was not only used in industry, but also when dealing with foreign objects. As for their mounts, they were all pure-blooded black horses of the highest quality. Different from the carriages he saw before, these black horses retained their strong horse leg muscles to a certain extent. They were embedded with high-level modifications to strengthen the horse's mobility. These knights should not be ordinary people. It's better to keep a low profile. Han Dong tried his best to blend in with the crowd in order to minimize his presence. The 30 black knights surrounded the square and stood at an equal distance, completely sealing off the square. The leading black knight drew out a gorgeous sword from his waist. One could see that the surface of the sword was surrounded by a kind of white cold air. The blade was pointed at the night sky. A vigorous sound came from the bottom of the mask, covering the whole square. The ceremony is about to begin. All those who are not selected, leave immediately. Chapter 7. Under the supervision of the Black Rose Knight. About a third of the people had tears in their eyes as they were separated from their loved ones. The sadness in their eyes seemed to be too much. It was a strange feeling as if they were sending their loved ones to the crematorium. Under this strange atmosphere, most of the people in the square lost control of their emotions. At this moment, the voice that covered the whole square sounded again, "Fear will only make you weaker, that's all. And the weak do not have the right to live in the current world. You and your families are alive because of the elite members of the 13 Knight. They risked their lives to obtain the unique brass material in the Destiny realm and created this holy city, Nunthena, that can protect millions of people. Now it is time to prove your worth. Go to the Destiny realm and resist the fear that you have never experienced before. Struggle on the edge of life and death and survive to become a returnee. Remember, rationality and courage are your only weapons. If you survive, you will be rewarded. Your loved ones will also be proud of you and live a better life." The knight's speech echoed in everyone's mind. Although it was not an inspiring speech, it made most of the people's fear disappear by half. That's right, since they had already come to this step, why not fight? Even if it was not for humanity, they had to fight hard for themselves and their families to survive. Just as the youths in the square were trying to form a group to cheer each other on. Han Dong, on the other hand, chose a place with a lot of people. He found an empty space and sat down, thinking about some of the information mentioned by the knight. Destiny realm? Han Dong was very interested in this new term in the knight's speech. Survive and become a returnee? These knights who are much stronger than normal people, could it be that they are the elites who survived the current ceremony? Speaking of which, what kind of place is this? Why is the mortality rate so high? Han Dong was not afraid. He had already died once. He did not think that there was anything more terrifying than death. Instead, he felt that the so-called Destiny realm was very interesting. He waited quietly and stared at the clockwork device on his wrist. The countdown was about to end. 10, 9, 8, the last 10 seconds. Han Dong also became nervous. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. 3, 2, 1, plop. The ground turned into a pool of viscous black liquid. Thousands of people gathered in the square fell into it. Because his body was wrapped in the viscous liquid, It was difficult for him to breathe and struggle. At the same time, a notification sound was transmitted into everyone's ears through the viscous liquid. User's identity has been confirmed, newcomer. Generating random scene, the first two voices were targeted at everyone. Just as most of the people were about to collapse from suffocation, notifications for different entrants sounded in their minds. The message Han Dong received was, "The scene has been generated." The background is from the Kyushu movie Possessed, Director's Revision. Type: Evil Spirit Difficulty, Newcomer, Main Quest Requirement. Survive for 3 days without leaving the abandoned villa. Reward: 1 fate point, low probability of obtaining a card of fate. Novice. As the notification ended, the feeling of adhesion around his body also disappeared. Han Dong and 5 other ordinary people from the holy city appeared on a small road in the countryside. Muddy paths, low bungalows, and telephone poles with registration stickers. Han Dong was very familiar with this place. Wasn't this the countryside of his motherland? Just by looking at the hightail at the entrance of the farm, he could confirm that it was a pure-blooded Chinese rural dog. Through some beautiful self-built villas, the internet ports installed on the telephone poles, and the old man sitting on a deck chair in front of the door watching short videos, the timeline became clear. This should be the era of Han Dong's life. Moreover, Han Dong also found that his clothes had changed. He had changed into a simple outfit suitable for a college student. The so-called Destiny Realm is actually based on a movie from my original world? Just as Han Dong was surprised by the realistic environment and the realistic characters, his 5 teammates were completely panicking. It was not because they were in an unfamiliar environment with a completely different architectural style, but because of the system notification they received. A thin black-haired woman knelt on the ground, clutching the cross in front of her chest and trembling. "Lord, why do I have to suffer so much?" A bald Caucasian man, who was about 25 years old, lowered his head and stomped his feet, gnashing his teeth. "Evil spirit type. 4 stars difficulty. It's over, we are all going to die here, there is no chance of leaving alive. Damned knights, I curse you." A rather beautiful girl with long hair and blue eyes kept looking around, looking for a chance of survival in her companions. "Excuse me, is there a candidate for the knights? Can you find a way to help me survive? I am willing to give up everything." The girl's gaze lingered on Han Dong, who was relatively calm. She immediately determined that Han Dong was not a candidate for the Order of Knights, given his thin and weak body. Soon, because the girl did not find a person to rely on, her eyes immediately lost their spirit due to despair, and stood there foolishly. Just when most of the people were depressed. Among the 6 people, a rather special young man stood out. He had blonde curly hair and wore a pair of delicate bronze goggles. Han Dong also noticed that the movement of this person's right arm was not very natural. There was a slight metallic luster between the white gloves and the cuffs of the sleeves. Because of the change in clothing, everyone was wearing university student clothing in the current setting, but this person's temperament was different from ordinary civilians. He seemed to be from the middle class of the sacred city, or even higher. Friends, now is not the time to be afraid and scared. Do you remember what the great Black Rose Knight warned us not long ago? Fear will only make us fail. Only reason and courage are our only weapons, the only weapons that can defeat the evil spirit. The great Black Rose Knight commander once passed a 5 stars difficulty event when he was a newcomer. We are only facing a 4 stars difficulty event. It is not impossible for us to survive. Everyone, unite, we will definitely find a chance to survive. Chapter 8. The curly-haired young man's motivational words had a certain effect. The first to react was the black-haired woman holding the cross. That's right. The great Captain Coden had successfully survived a 5-star curse event, and he had even led a large portion of his team to safety. Our determination will definitely be discovered by the Lord, and the Lord will lead us out of this dangerous black forest. At this moment, a voice echoed in everyone's minds. The incident has yet to begin. You are a university student filming team. Please make direct contact with the main character of the incident, Granny Wong, within an hour and head to the abandoned mountain villa together. If you do not make contact with Granny Wong within the specified time and interfere or refuse to take the vehicle to the location of the incident, you will be forcibly erased. They had an hour to prepare. The curly-haired young man tried to organize everyone to increase the probability of survival. There's plenty of time. Let's introduce ourselves. My name is Edward Murray. My father is a slightly famous writer, and my family is quite well off. Due to an accident when I was young, my right hand became like this. The young man took off his white gloves and rolled up his sleeves. A metal prosthetic limb that was a combination of mechanical aesthetics was revealed. The elbow, wrist, and finger joints were made up of a large number of precision gears and miniature bolts. Not only could it achieve normal bending between joints, but it could also perform bending movements that ordinary people could not achieve. Hidden in the streamlined metal arm were small steam hydraulic devices that gave the prosthetic limb great strength. Steam prosthetic limb. The rather beautiful blonde girl seemed to have grasped at straws. She tried her best to show her beauty and leaned her body towards the young man. Steam prosthetic limbs were not something that ordinary people could come into contact with. Even a middle-class family in the Holy City would have to spend a lot of money to buy such a prosthetic limb. The blonde girl's gaze was completely focused on the curly-haired young man, Murray, and she quickly introduced herself. My name is Hall Monica. My mother works in the restaurant. The curly-haired young man, Murray, smiled slightly. He did not accept the girl's embrace, nor did he reject her. He maintained a distance of about 2 fists. Since someone had taken the lead, the self-introduction went smoothly. The strongest and oldest bald white man in the team said with a disdainful expression, Darian. I'm an ordinary worker in a parts factory. I'm better at beating people up. Damn it. If it's a mutant or monster type event, I can still fight it head-on. This kind of untouchable evil spirit is really disgusting. Why is my luck so bad? Once Darian thought of the problem, he directly punched the wall by the road. Of course, he was limited by his body constitution, so he only made a sound. The wall did not move at all. The black-haired girl with the cross in her hand slowly stood up. My name is Grim Ackerman. I'm a volunteer at the cathedral. Sir Priest promised me that when I come of age in the second half of the year, I'll be able to officially work at the cathedral. The priest is very good to me. During the volunteer period, as long as I work overtime in the church at night for a period of time, I will be rewarded with 10 pence. There was an obvious problem with this sentence. The church would not open its doors at night, so the so-called working overtime at night was a bit strange. Then, a young man who pretended to be calm but was actually very flustered stood up. He looked to be in his 20s. His linen shirt was paired with a coarse vest and a newspaper cap with a furred edge. Peters Herbert. Everyone can just call me Bert. I follow my father to sell newspapers. I'm not particularly good at anything, but I can run faster. I can see who is willing to buy newspapers. I'll work hard and hope that everyone can survive. This newspaper boy could be considered the most optimistic person in the team. In the end, it was naturally Han Dong's turn. Among the team, Han Dong's physical fitness was probably ranked last with the thin and weak female believer. Under the linen shirt, his skinny body gave off a feeling that he would be blown away by a gust of wind. Warren Nicholas. His body isn't very good, so he stays at home and does nothing. However, when he's bored, he has a certain understanding of linguistics and should be able to act as a translator. Han Dong deliberately gave a specialty. If he appeared too useless, he would definitely be despised by his teammates. With a lot of information unclear and a weak body, Han Dong had to make himself appear to be of some use and be on equal terms with his teammates. At the very least, he could not be the worst member. You know Kyushu's Chinese? The young man with the steam prosthesis, Edward Murray, was surprised. Yes. There's no problem with basic communication. Very good. In a while, you will be the translator and make contact with the important person, Granny Wang, so that all of us can successfully head to the location of the incident. Okay. Han Dong accepted the task and realized his value in the team. Edward turned to everyone and said, "Everyone, you don't mind me being the team leader, right? I hope that everyone can follow my instructions and requests in the upcoming operation. I will do my best to increase everyone's survival rate. If anyone has any opinions, you can raise them to me or the entire team. As long as it's reasonable, we will definitely accept them." I agree. The blonde harmonica was the first to agree. Following that, Han Dong also raised his hand. For such a group operation, it was necessary to have a leader. From the current situation, Edward was qualified. Just as everyone raised their hands one after another, the bald man, Darien, had a look of disdain. "I will follow you to the location of the incident. I will do whatever I want. I won't listen to anyone's opinions." Edward replied with a smile. "I understand, Darien. As long as you don't do anything that harms the team, you can do whatever you want." Then, Edward turned to Han Dong. "Friend Nicholas, shall we set off?" "All right." Just like that, the six of them finished their introductions and formed a united front. They officially embarked on the journey of terror. For the convenience of remembering, Han Dong labeled each of his 5 teammates with a label: prosthesis, believer, a blonde, brother bald, paperboy. In addition, a message from the faceless head dispelled Han Dong's intention to take advantage of the situation. Detected that the host is currently in a special spatial zone. Opening the prison will consume a large amount of spatial energy. The portable prison will only be opened temporarily when external objects are stored. The host is unable to enter the portable prison. Indeed, it's not that simple. Chapter 9. When he was alive, Han Dong was not a nerd who only studied and did research. He had his own interests and hobbies, but he did not spend much time on them. If there was a long waiting period, Han Dong would watch movies in the lab to pass the time. Movies were a form of art. From Han Dong's point of view, some movies were very deep, and watching them was good for his thinking. Science fiction movies were Han Dong's favorite, but he rarely watched horror movies. It was not that he was afraid, but he was not interested in these kinds of supernatural creatures that science could not directly explain. He thought that it was just a product of people's imagination and the combination of real-life creatures. There was not much point in watching it. In Han Dong's mind, the term domestic horror movie was a bad movie that was used to make money. Kyushu's movie, Bewitched? Han Dong vaguely remembered that when he posted a movie review on a website, he saw a brief introduction and movie review of Bewitched, a horror movie made by a novice director at a low cost of 70,000 yuan and even includes the 20,000 yuan medical fee for the male lead's injury during filming. In reality, the movie crushed the horror movies that are easily worth millions of yuan in the country. It can even compete head-on with the horror movies from other countries. It won many awards, but before it was released, something went wrong. I wonder if the producers were really bewitched. Han Dong was very curious at the time. He tried to search for information, but found that there were very few resources on Bewitched. It was even harder to search for information on Bewitched. In the process of searching for information, Han Dong found that Bewitched, which was originally scheduled for release, was suddenly cancelled. It seemed to be related to some strange event. One of the more impactful events happened at a certain Hong Kong International Film Festival. During the screening of this movie, a female audience member ran back and forth in the theater because she was traumatized. She had a mental problem. Han Dong believed that this kind of movie, which was shot in a pseudo-documentary style, would resonate with the audience to a certain extent. This female audience member had most likely seen similar scenes when she was a child. She was completely immersed in the movie and fell into a panic. Because he could not find any movie resources at the time, and because the time between experiments was up, Han Dong needed to immediately perform bacterial isolation. Later, he forgot about this movie. What a pity! If he had watched this movie back then, his chances of survival would have been greatly increased. He only remembered that the movie was shot in the form of a pseudo-documentary. It told the story of two university students who went to the countryside to shoot a documentary about fortune-telling. On the way, they encountered a strange incident. As for the rest, no one knew. Evil spirits. It seems that we really will encounter evil spirits along the way that science can't explain. In 3 days, as long as he could survive, he would become a returnee in the eyes of the knights. From the current information, the mortality rate was extremely high. Once he made the wrong decision, he might walk down a path of no return. Be serious and cherish your life this time. It was impossible to say that he wasn't nervous. Any living being, when faced with an unknown object that they could not fight against, would feel fear. It was just that different people had different resistance and reactions to fear. After experiencing death once, Han Dong was able to suppress the fear in his heart to a great extent. A team of 6. Other than the change in their attire, everyone in the team was equipped with a single-handed camera, a student ID card, and 500 yuan in cash. Of course, the clockwork devices on their wrists were also present, and the countdown had been reset. It corresponded to 3 days and 72 hours. Everyone moved together and soon arrived in front of a courtyard. There were many uncles and aunties with simple folk customs gathered here. Look, even foreigners came to Granny Wang for fortune-telling. This has brought honor to our village. Han Dong asked in Mandarin with a Western accent. After learning that this was Granny Wang's house, these people were all queuing up for fortune-telling. However, Granny Wang was not at home at the moment. She had gone to the village in the east to visit. After learning this information, everyone quickly rushed to Liba village in the east and found the door of Granny Wang's house. At this time, the ritual had entered the final stage. A strange red paper doll was placed at the door. Granny Wang stirred the talisman water in the bowl with her fingers and let a woman with an ugly expression drink it. Han Dong whispered to the captain, "Edward, there's still half an hour left to establish a relationship with Granny Wang. Out of etiquette, wait until the ritual is over before contacting Granny Wang. I need to go to the toilet. I'll be back soon." "Okay, go ahead." There were many public toilets in the village. Of course, Han Dong's purpose was not to go to the toilet. Instead, he wanted to take advantage of the time before the incident officially began to understand an extremely important matter that involved him in advance. Han Dong came to a small shop. First, he checked the calendar to confirm the current time, November 5, 2015. "Hello, how much is the public phone charge?" "Call anywhere, it's free." This was the first time the lady boss had met a foreigner in the countryside. A few cents was nothing. "Thank you. Your Mandarin is more standard than mine. You're amazing." Han Dong smiled out of politeness and picked up the receiver of the landline. Squeak. Unexpectedly, just as the receiver was close to his ear, a sharp sound that gave Han Dong a splitting headache immediately rang in his mind. In the incident scenario, direct or indirect communication with the outside world through communication devices is prohibited. You should have said so earlier. Han Dong felt helpless. Actually, he wanted to use the phone to find a loophole in the system. He wanted to call his friend when he was alive to confirm whether the current movie world was the same as the world he was in when he was alive. Even if it was different, Han Dong planned to get some horror movie resources from the outside world. Even if it was not useful in the current incident, it would definitely be useful in the future. Since this path to contact the outside world was blocked, Han Dong could only use the 500 yuan given by the system to buy some things that might be useful in the future. He put them all in a backpack. Coincidentally, the ritual was over. Granny Wang and her husband said goodbye to the family who had successfully exorcised the evil. "Hello, Granny Wang, we are." They handed over their student IDs and introduced themselves. A group of international students came from far away to the countryside to film a documentary. Of course, Granny Wang had her own selfish motives. If she could become famous through the documentary, her business would definitely be better in the future. Therefore, Granny Wang happily agreed to be interviewed and filmed by the 6 people. At this moment, the system's voice sounded again. "You have established a correct relationship with the important person, Granny Wang. Please follow Granny Wang to the incident location." Chapter 10. Without knowing the plot of the movie at all, they could only follow Granny Wang and get as much information as possible through Han Dong as the translator. From the communication process, they learned that Granny Wang was mainly engaged in fortune-telling and returning people. It was the first time Han Dong heard of the latter term. According to Granny Wang, it was actually a kind of exorcism. The method was to find a substitute, usually a paper doll, and transfer the illness and pain in one's body to the substitute to achieve the goal of healing. The process was complicated and tedious, usually taking 3 hours or even longer. Halfway through the interview, Granny Wang's husband, Uncle Lu, suddenly came forward. He interrupted the interview process and said that someone in Wangzigang was possessed and urgently needed a return ceremony. Granny Wang was not very willing. After all, Wangzigang was far away and remote. It would take at least 5 hours to drive there. However, when she heard her husband say that the price had been settled, she calculated the time and immediately prepared to leave. They should be able to arrive before evening. In the eyes of Han Dong and the others, the so-called Wangzigang was the place where this incident happened. While Granny Wang and her husband were packing the necessary luggage, the group used the 500 yuan issued by the system to buy a series of necessities locally. For example, flashlights, compressed biscuits, mineral water, and so on in case of emergency. The bald Delian even bought a woodcutter for self-defense. In fact, there was no need to equip himself with such an ordinary weapon. Evil spirit incidents were not something that could be solved with a knife. Carrying such a thing would affect the movement. Everything was ready. Uncle Lu considered the problem of the following group and got a relatively spacious van. The back seat could fit 6 people. Next, they just had to wait for the destination. The 5-hour drive could have been completely enough to sleep in the van. However, because of worry, anxiety, and the fear of death, most of them could not fall asleep during the drive. They stared blankly at the countryside scenery outside the window. Han Dong was different. Due to the fact that his previous scientific research experiment required him to reverse day and night, to a certain extent, he could automatically adjust his biological clock. He also learned a method of rapid sleep from the internet. Learning the sleeping techniques of World War II pilots, Han Dong relaxed his body completely and fell asleep quickly by the window. If he could sleep for 5 hours before the incident to replenish his energy, even if something strange happened at night, he could still concentrate on analyzing and dealing with it. This was the first time Han Dong had fallen asleep since he was reborn 7 years ago. When he was completely asleep, Han Dong ushered in a strange dream. 1. In the dreamscape, Han Dong returned to the familiar University of Florence. Holding the teacher's book, he walked into the lecture hall. Unlike in the past, not a single student skipped class in the face of the boring cell biology class. The huge lecture hall was full. What was even stranger was, the students were all wearing hooded jackets and had their heads lowered, making it impossible to see their faces. Han Dong walked to the podium and habitually took out a USB flash drive and plugged it into the interface of the multimedia device. At this moment, a strange scene occurred. The USB drive's port turned into a slippery tentacle and was inserted into the meatball multimedia device. The cell biology courseware that was supposed to be displayed on the projection screen changed into a strange logo that Han Dong could not understand. At the same time, all the students in the lecture hall raised their heads and took off their hoods, revealing faceless faces. Faceless, Wang. With a ringing sound in his ears, Han Dong suddenly woke up. Night fell. When Han Dong woke up, the van had just arrived at the scene of the incident, Wangzigang, in front of the abandoned farmhouse. In front of the van stood an old and almost abandoned rectangular bungalow. The two-story bungalow was once used as a hotel. The second floor was divided into 8 separate rooms, and the connecting stairs were located in the center. Large red lanterns were neatly hung in the aisle of the second floor. It was a little strange in the night. The client and the possessed lived in this bungalow. Just as everyone stared at the dilapidated building through the bed of the van, Han Dong, who had just woken up from the nightmare, was a little uncomfortable. His hands were stuck in his waist pocket, and his expression was strange. It seemed that he was deliberately hiding something. We have arrived at the incident area. The countdown has begun. The relevant requirements are as follows. 1. The activity area of all participants is the abandoned villa and the surrounding 500 meters. Individuals will be erased if they leave the specified range for more than 10 seconds. 2. Groups are not allowed. Please choose a room to sleep in. If 2 people are in the same room between 2300 hours and 6 o'clock, a warning will be issued for the first time and erased for the second time. 3. During the incident period, you are free to communicate and interact with the storyline characters. There are no restrictions. 4. After the 72-hour countdown is over, the survivors will be teleported away. As everyone alighted from the van, an honest-looking young man in his 30s stepped forward to greet Granny Wang and asked, "Grandmaster, who are these?" "They're international students who are filming a documentary. They'll be recording the entire process of the return. You don't mind, do you?" "As long as it doesn't affect the Grandmaster's work, I don't mind. It's just that I don't think we've prepared enough dinner." Han Dong hurriedly stepped forward and said politely, "It's fine. We've prepared our own food. Just let Granny Wang and Uncle Lu eat. There's no need to worry about us." After a series of evasions and negotiations, everyone successfully entered the hall on the first floor of the bungalow and met the possessed party. It was different from the imagined possessed party who was tied to a big bed or locked in a room, screaming, self-mutilating, or eating insects. The possessed party was a long-haired, gentle-looking rural woman. She looked normal on the surface and was even responsible for washing and cooking vegetables. After dinner, they immediately got to the main topic. The young man who lived here introduced himself and explained the situation of the possessed party. He learned that the young man and the possessed woman were siblings. The young man's name was Ching Ching, and the possessed woman's name was Chun-Li. They used to run a farmhouse here, and business was not bad. However, a few years ago they were abandoned because of the relocation of the tourist area. As for her sister, Chun-Li's situation was more special. She behaved normally during the day and would only act up at night. According to Ching Ching, they had already seen a doctor in the city. The diagnosis was schizophrenia. However, Chun-Li insisted that she did not have schizophrenia. Instead, there was something living in her body. That was the general situation. Ching Ching hoped that Granny Wang could transfer the thing living in her sister's body to the paper doll through the method of return. "We can't do it now. The yin energy at night is too strong. The thing living in your sister's body might not be able to be lured out. Moreover, it's tiring to rush over at the last minute. Returning a person is a very energy-consuming ritual. We can only do it tomorrow." Granny Wang's statement meant that everyone would have to stay here for the night. Ching Ching said enthusiastically, "Okay. I'll take you to the rooms on the second floor to rest. The conditions here are not very good. I hope everyone can make do." The 6 people in the film crew, Granny Wang and her husband, and the possessed woman, Chun-Li. They happened to live on the second floor of the bungalow with large red lanterns. Chapter 11. Since the first floor of the bungalow was planned as a reception hall, kitchen, activity room, utility room, and a room that belonged to Da Qing, everyone could only live on the second floor. The rooms on the second floor were simply numbered 1 to 8 and arranged from left to right. The stairs in the middle divided the second floor into 2 parts. Rooms 1 to 4 were the left area, and rooms 5 to 8 were the right area. The important people, Mrs. Wang and her husband, lived in room 4. The important person, Chun-Li, lived in room 6. She had to return to her room before 8 o'clock in the evening. In addition, Da Qing locked the door with an iron chain. As for the reason for locking the door, Da Qing did not directly explain, but it was definitely related to Chun-Li being possessed. The important person, little brother Da Qing, as mentioned before, lived on the first floor. Not to mention whether Mrs. Wang had the ability to exorcise evil spirits. Based on the current information, the main body of this evil spirit incident should be the possessed Chun-Li. Therefore, the danger level of living on the right side of the second floor was obviously higher than the left side. Everyone thought that there would be serious disagreements because of this reason. Who knew that when the room allocation was carried out, Darian actually took the initiative to ask to live in the room next to Chun-Li's. As for the more kind-hearted newspaper boy, Herbert, he also indicated that he did not care and could live anywhere. With the concessions of the 2 team members, Edward's arrangement became very simple. The final housing arrangement was decided. On the left side of the second floor, room 1 Han Dong, room 2 Monica, the blonde girl, room 3 Edward, the prosthetic on the right side of the second floor, room 5 Herbert, the newspaper boy, room 7 Darian, the bald man, room 8 Ackerman. The believer Han Dong was also very surprised by this result. He, who said that he did not care, was actually arranged to live in room 1, the farthest from Chun-Li. In theory, it was the safest room. The reason given by Edward was that Han Dong was the weakest person in the team. At the same time, only Han Dong was proficient in Kyushu's Chinese, so it was necessary to ensure Han Dong's safety. In addition, there were 2 settings. 1. There was no toilet in the bungalow. The toilet was 50 meters away from the bungalow. 2. At 2300 hours at night, Da Qing would cut off the power of the bungalow and turn it on again at 6 o'clock the next day. The reason was that the possessed sister would be stimulated by electricity at night. These 2 settings were a little troublesome. However, everyone had a way to deal with it. If they needed to wake up in the middle of the night, they could just use the mineral water bottles in their backpacks. As for the lack of electricity, everyone had bought a flashlight before they came. At the same time, the camera equipped with the system also had the ability to film at night. Before going to sleep, Edward gathered the team members in a room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have a friend who became a novice knight last year as a returnee. From him, I learned some small knowledge about entering the Destiny realm for the first time. The most important thing was to try not to interfere with the actions and decisions of the plot characters, and not to do anything that went against common sense. The more he interfered, the more complicated the matter would become, and it might even become a dead end. I hope everyone can play the role of a university student and not casually come into contact with the plot characters. If anyone has any ideas, feel free to communicate with me." Understood. Edward's intention was to let the plot develop on its own. Everyone present, except for Baldy, agreed. Edward continued, "Also, I suggest, if you hear any strange noises at night, do not leave your room. The danger of the first night won't be too high. After all, the so-called returning ceremony hasn't started yet, and the state of the plot characters is relatively normal. As long as everyone stays in the room safely, there shouldn't be any danger. How can you be sure that there's no danger? You're clearly a rookie yourself, Baldy Dryan said with disdain. Edward smiled and replied, at least staying in the room is safer than wandering in the corridor. I'm just suggesting. I'm not forcing everyone to do so. We'll discuss the other matters in detail after the returning ceremony tomorrow. Everyone, go back and rest. The impromptu meeting was adjourned. Just as everyone was leaving, the rather beautiful blonde Monica purposely stayed in Edward's room and said some ambiguous and probing words. Unfortunately, Edward's attitude was still neutral. As the atmosphere gradually became awkward, Monica could only return to her room alone. While alone, Edward took out a clean rag and wiped the steam prosthetic right arm with a smile, as if he was treating his lover in the picture. For star evil spirit type, the difficulty is similar to what I expected. As long as I can become a returnee, I can successfully become a novice knight and have a higher start than others. Room 1. After returning to his room, Han Dong immediately locked the door. Ever since he arrived, Han Dong hadn't been able to find a chance to be alone. After waking up from a nightmare, his condition was a little strange. Therefore, Han Dong kept a large portion of his attention on himself. What's this? He placed his hands in front of him and slowly activated the faceless head, while searching for the magical feeling from the nightmare. Instantly, a strange aura spread in the room. Creak, creak. A tentacle with gray spots slowly emerged from his palm and swayed strangely in the air. A hidden ability? Han Dong stared at the tentacle and was a little dumbfounded. When I escaped from prison and didn't have a physical body, I also relied on the mycelial tentacles growing out of my neck to move around. But the tentacles in the form of mycelial tentacles are different from now. This tentacle is thicker and doesn't belong to the mycelial category. It emits a strange aura and is very dangerous. About 10 seconds passed. The tentacle growing out of his palm turned into a pool of dirty water, dripping and evaporating. At the same time, a sense of weakness swept through Han Dong's body. Cough, cough, cough. It seems that using this tentacle ability will put a great burden on my body. I can't use it except in a critical moment. He used a piece of paper to wipe away the dirty saliva coughed out from the corner of his mouth. After a little recovery, Han Dong took out the usable items he bought from his backpack. A flashlight and a knife were placed under his pillow. The knife wasn't used to deal with evil spirits, but for experiments and to defend against people. In addition to the flashlight and knife, Han Dong's backpack also contained 2 sets of village-style clothes, but he didn't know what to do with them. Edward should be right. As long as I don't take the initiative to disturb the storyline characters, the first night won't be too dangerous before the returning ceremony. Let's sleep. Due to the influence of the nightmare, Han Dong's rest in the car was almost in vain. Coupled with the use of the strange tentacle ability, Han Dong was in a weakened state and urgently needed to rest. Lying on the bed, it didn't take long for him to fall asleep. This time there were no nightmares. Instead, he vaguely heard the sound of footsteps and a baby crying in the corridor, which woke Han Dong up in the middle of the night. The power was cut off. The room was dark. However, the big red lantern in the corridor was still lit. He didn't know which designer's brainless design was, but a round hole about the size of a head was opened in the center of the door and filled with transparent glass. It could be clearly seen under the illumination of the big red lantern. A black-haired woman holding a child passed by the door. Chapter 12. The perspective switched to the room where Darian the Bald was. In the team, he was the most irritable person with a certain violent tendency. From the beginning, he did not trust anyone and had no intention of following Edward's command. As a worker, his jealousy of the life of the middle and high-yield classes had evolved into hatred. After learning about Edward's background, he hated this rich kid from the bottom of his heart. Edward, who seemed kind, was just a wolf in sheep's clothing in his eyes. Darian drank a bottle of white wine he bought to boost his courage. He took a flashlight and a chopper and sneaked out of the room. The power supply to the bungalow had been cut off by Daching at 2300 hours. The red lantern could only illuminate the corridor. A flashlight was still necessary at this time. Darian whispered, "According to statistics, the survival rate of newbies is less than 1%. Not to mention a 4-star level evil spirit incident. The probability of us surviving may not even be 1 in 1,000. Even if I, Darian, am going to die, I will die by my own choice. Why didn't I kill the person who was possessed in advance? Maybe this can delay the time and increase the probability of survival." Darian's idea was simple. He wanted to kill the possessed Chun-Li on the first night before the incident completely worsened. This was also the reason why he chose to live next door to Chun-Li's room. Because Chun-Li's room was locked by iron chains, if he destroyed it directly, it might be heard by others. Therefore, he chose to sneak in secretly. Darian went down the stairs and went to the back of the bungalow. The high-intensity work system of 997 allowed him to train his muscles in the factory. It was easy for him to climb up such an old bungalow. But just as he climbed up the wall and stuck to the window of Chun-Li's room, he was stunned. The room was not dark. There was a red candle burning at the bedside. In the room illuminated by the fire, Chun-Li's figure could not be seen at all. What was even stranger was that the door, which should have been locked, was currently open. I even checked when I left the room. Chun-Li's door is locked by iron chains. It can't be opened at all. How did it open? All kinds of strange phenomena gave Darian a sense of fear from the bottom of his heart. Even with the help of alcohol, it was difficult to get rid of. But he had already come this far, and Darian would not back down. The window was not locked. Darian sneaked into room 6. So cold, the temperature inside the room was probably 10 degrees Celsius lower than the outside, and this chill seemed to seep into his bones. Just as Darian took up his hatchet for courage. Da-da-da! The silence of the night was broken by the sound of footsteps. At the same time, a woman carrying a baby walked past the door. This scene frightened Darian so much that his body trembled. But he still suppressed the fear that overflowed from the bottom of his heart and steadied himself. In the next second, he rushed forward with the help of the alcohol and tried to drag Chun-Li back into the room to kill her. Who knew? In less than 2 seconds, Darian chased out of the room. There were only a few big red lanterns swaying in the wind in the empty corridor. There was no woman holding a baby. Where is he? The strange, unknown, and incomprehensible phenomenon made Darian nervous. Fear rose in his heart. De Leon's palms were covered in sweat, and so was his forehead. A gust of cold wind blew at the back of Darian's ear. A certain black-haired woman was standing motionlessly behind him, her mouth constantly exhaling cold air. 10 cold fingers stuck to him like centipedes. They slid along Darian's neck to his cheek. Her fingernails were full of mud. 10 fingers tightly clasped Darian's face, making him unable to move. An irresistible force erupted and quickly dragged Darian, the strongest of the 6 people in the team, into the room. Clang! 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 With the sound of the iron chain, the door was locked. The next morning, Daching connected the bungalow to electricity at 6 o'clock sharp. He went up to the 2nd floor and unlocked his sister's door with the key. Chun-Li had just changed her clothes and acted normal. She went downstairs with her brother Daching and prepared breakfast for everyone. For the team members, the first night wasn't very peaceful. Everyone experienced the same thing. They were woken up in the middle of the night by the sound of footsteps and a baby crying. Through the glass window on the door, they saw a woman carrying a baby pacing back and forth in the corridor. Edward and the paperboy saw very clearly that the woman passing by was the possessed Chun-Li. Such an experience frightened everyone, and they didn't sleep well for the rest of the night. It's just a simple scare. At least we're all fine. While Edward comforted everyone, he looked at the team members gathered in the room. Where's Darian? Is he still sleeping? When I passed by just now, I took a peek. He doesn't seem to be in the room, Ackerman, who was holding the cross tightly, said in a low voice. Let's go take a look. Edward realized that something was wrong and ran to Darian's door. As expected, there was no one inside. Han Dong, who was standing at the back of the team, suggested while everyone was talking, "Why don't we ask Da Qing? If Darian left the bungalow early, Da Qing, who lives on the first floor, should know." Edward nodded and immediately went downstairs. I hope nothing happens to Darian. The blonde woman, Monica, who was following behind him, whispered, "It's best if this reckless Baldy dies. Otherwise, we'll be killed by him sooner or later." Although her voice was soft, Han Dong, who was walking at the back, still heard it. As a matter of fact, Han Dong had the same thought. Darian's reckless behavior could indeed bring trouble to the team. From the perspective of benefits, his death would indeed increase the survival rate of the team. On the first floor, Da Qing was starting a fire and preparing to cook noodles for everyone. His sister, Chun-Li, was silently cutting vegetables. "Brother Da Qing, did you see the bald student with us? The one with a stronger body and is 8 meters tall." After Da Qing put the wood in his hand into the stove, he turned his head with a puzzled expression and looked at the group of foreign students. "Bald student? Aren't you all here? If I remember correctly, there's a total of 5 of you, right?" 5? Han Dong was puzzled. "Yes. Didn't Granny Wang bring the 5 of you here to record the returning ceremony? Right, sis?" Chun-Li, who was silently cutting vegetables at the side, nodded slightly. Qing Qing's words shocked the 5 members of the team. The timid believer, Ackerman, was so frightened that he took 2 steps back. His body trembled slightly. Obviously, the memories of Darian had been completely deleted from the brains of the people involved in the incident. This indirectly meant that Darian had been killed last night. The specific reason was unknown. At the same time, a notification sounded. Event time remaining, 60 hours. Number of survivors, 5 each among the team of 5, only Han Dong and Edward were relatively calm. Of course, Han Dong was still shocked. After all, a living person had disappeared without a trace. Even his memory had been deleted from the minds of the people involved in the incident. Unknowingly, a sense of fear had spread in the hearts of every member of the team. Chapter 13. Breakfast time. Chun-Li and her brother prepared a sufficient amount of fried egg noodles for everyone. Granny Wang and her husband, as well as the team of 5, were all gathered here. Apart from Edward and Han Dong, who behaved normally, the other team members were more or less abnormal. After putting down the bowls, Granny Wang spoke. "The return ceremony is set to be held at the end of the morning in Chun-Li's room. I now need to prepare in advance and set up the ceremony venue. I will inform you when the time is up. During the setting up of the venue, no one is allowed to enter except for my wife. If you act rashly, you might scare away the substitute. Do you understand?" Yes. There were still more than 2 hours left before the ceremony began. Edward made a suggestion to use this time to determine the active area. Considering that this bungalow where the bewitched Chun-Li lived might develop into an extremely dangerous area in the later stages. Moreover, the system also gave a 500-meter radius of active area. It was necessary to confirm the general situation of the area in advance and draw a detailed map. Paperboy Herbert said that in addition to selling newspapers, he also learned how to draw from his father. As long as the area was not too big, he could draw a more accurate map after walking through it once. "Captain, I'm not feeling well," Han Dong said. Edward stared at Han Dong's thin and yellowed body and smiled. "Then you can stay in the room and rest. Leave the drawing of the map to us." "Thank you." As the team's interpreter, Han Dong was irreplaceable. No one objected to the fact that he wanted to rest. As Edward led the team away, Han Dong took a deep breath and prepared to carry out his plan. On the surface, there was nothing wrong with Edward's idea of non-intervention. It seemed to be the safest and most reliable way to save his life. But there was a problem in itself. Was Edward really trustworthy? In an incident with a terrifyingly high mortality rate, if one did not have their own ideas, no backup plan, and just waited for the danger to come, it would be too stupid. Han Dong was actually somewhat similar to the bald Darien in one aspect. He did not trust anyone from the beginning. In this kind of life-and-death situation, Han Dong did not believe that a group of strangers would help each other. "Uncle Lu, where are you going?" Han Dong happened to bump into Granny Wang's husband at the staircase. "Go and buy something for your aunt in town. The ritual needs some small items. It's very complicated, and you won't understand it even if I explain it to you." "All right." After Han Dong returned to his room, he took out the items he had prepared in his backpack. The other team members used the $500 given by the system to buy some survival necessities. On the other hand, Han Dong took out some money and bought a few sets of rural clothes, one of which was exactly the same as Uncle Lu's. Head of the Faceless, one of his abilities was imitation. The head imitated Han Dong's appearance when he was alive. Even Han Dong himself couldn't tell if it was real or fake when he looked in the mirror. This was enough to prove that the imitation was real. After some preparations, Han Dong imitated Uncle Lu's appearance and went to the ritual preparation room. "Old Wang, why are you strolling around? If you don't have anything else to do, come over and help set it up." Wang Po, who was alone with her husband, didn't have the image of a witch at all. She was currently sitting on the bed playing with her mobile phone. As for the things that needed to be prepared, there wasn't much that needed to be prepared. They only needed to place some offerings on the wooden table, and the so-called child substitute paper figurine was randomly placed in the corner. "Is this okay?" Han Dong tried to place the offerings on the table. "It's fine as long as it's neat, there's no need for so many rules. Just like before, you first need to drug Chinli. Her body isn't very good, so just use 23% of the drug. I've already prepared the antidote here. After this, we'll split it 64%. Speaking of this, Han Dong immediately understood how this famous Wang Po exorcised the evil spirit and cured the disease. Okay, Han Dong immediately turned back to the room, changed into another set of clothes, and disguised himself as Qing's little brother. In advance, Han Dong already knew that Qing's little brother had already ridden a motorcycle to the town 2 hours away to buy vegetables. After all, at noon, he still needed to prepare at least 7 people's meals. After the disguise was completed, Han Dong tried to enter the role of Qing. However, this time's disguise was different from the previous one. The danger was self-evident. The possessed Chun-Li was very likely to be the evil spirit in this incident. Creak. He pushed open the half-closed wooden door of the living room. Chun-Li was resting on the sofa with a dull expression on her face. During the day, she was not much different from a normal person. However, on the table in front of her, there was a sharp kitchen knife that had just been used to cut vegetables. The blade shone with a cold light. "Sis, are you okay?" "Close the door," Chun-Li said in a low voice. Han Dong remained calm, turned around and closed the door. He took a deep breath and prepared himself for battle. "Didn't you go to buy vegetables?" A cold voice came from behind him. When he turned around, he saw that Chun-Li was already holding the kitchen knife in her hand. Her body was leaning forward as if she was about to get up. Han Dong steadied his mind and tried his best to imitate Qing's way of speaking. "I'm not in a hurry to buy vegetables. I'm just a little worried that this matter won't go smoothly." Han Dong's words were just right. This matter in this sentence seemed to be talking about the returning ceremony. However, if there was any private matter between the siblings, he could use this sentence to get information out of it. Who knew? Chun-Li didn't say anything. She slowly got up with the kitchen knife. Her hair was also draped in front of her as she leaned forward, and only her red lips could be seen. When she approached Han Dong, buzz! The kitchen knife chopped down. The sharp kitchen knife flashed with a cold light and cut into the wall beside Han Dong's head. At this time, Han Dong and Chun-Li's faces were less than a fist apart, and he could clearly see her bloodshot eyes. The group of international students following us is a big problem. However, this is the only chance for revenge that we've been preparing for a long time. Continue to act according to the plan. You find a way to destroy Grandma Wang's van, and I'll find a way to scare away all the university students. Phew, hearing this answer, Han Dong breathed a sigh of relief. The moment Chun-Li swung the knife, Han Dong's body also froze. It was all because he had died once that he suppressed the nervousness of approaching death. Han Dong thought to himself, sure enough, it's useful to have a certain understanding of the national situation. In Jiuzhou, the examination of feudal superstitions is particularly strict. The local horror movies are often man-made. When the system notified him that Bewitched was a movie of Jiuzhou, Han Dong considered that there might be no ghosts in this movie. It was also because of this that he dared to contact Chun-Li alone. However, at that moment, he was really scared, and his palms were full of sweat. In this way, the position of the characters of the incident was completely clear. Grandma Wang was just a fake witch who swindled people. Because of something in the past, she formed a grudge with the siblings. Chun-Li and Qing simply lured Grandma Wang and her husband here, intending to complete their revenge plan in the wilderness. Then there was a problem. What about the evil spirit? At this moment, the system's voice echoed in Han Dong's head. A side event activated. A choice, event requirements, optional 1. Help Grandma Wang and her husband escape from the abandoned villa. 2. Help the siblings kill Grandma Wang and her husband in advance. Event rewards 1. Increase the probability of receiving cards of fate, novice, when the final reward is calculated. 2. Increase or decrease your relationship with the characters of the incident. Chapter 14. In fact, Han Dong's initial idea was to use his imitation ability to gain a deeper understanding of the characters in the movie The Bewitched. Who would have thought that this negotiation would unexpectedly trigger a side event? As for the card of fate mentioned in the side reward, Han Dong did not particularly care. After all, he still did not know if he could survive this event. What he valued more was the relationship between the characters. If he made the right choice and did the right thing, he might be able to increase his intimacy with the characters in the movie to a great extent. He might even be able to make them become useful helpers. The conversation with Chun-Li ended. Han Dong, who had returned to his dorm, removed his disguise and fell into deep thought. In fact, this time, when he removed his connection with the characters in the movie, in addition to understanding the nature of the movie and the relationship between the characters in the movie, it also raised a major question. Since the Wang couple and the Chen siblings were normal humans, who was the evil spirit? There were two possibilities. First, after the characters died, they turned into evil spirit. Second, the evil spirit wandered around the wilderness and had nothing to do with the characters in the movie. However, the first possibility was extremely small. This was because the bald man, De Leon, had been killed last night. This bald man had a strong body. If he was attacked by an ordinary person, he would not have died without making a sound. There was a high probability that he was killed by a mysterious evil spirit. Wait! The faces of the other members of the team suddenly flashed through Han Dong's mind. There is a third possibility. If I assume that there were only 5 humans from the Holy City who participated in the fate event from the beginning, the real evil spirit might have been among us as the 6th person from the beginning. For some reason, Han Dong's intuition told him that the third possibility was more likely. If this is the case, with my physical fitness to survive, I have to make full use of this side event to establish a relationship with the characters in the movie. Han Dong had already determined the direction of the operation. There was still more than an hour left before the returning ceremony. Edward and the others were still exploring the surrounding area and drawing a simple map. Han Dong returned to his original appearance and went to the first floor with the real identity of Nicholas to meet the bewitched Chun-Li again. Chun-Li's original plan was to scare the group of university students away in advance, then make a move on the Wang couple. Therefore, when Han Dong came to the first floor hall alone, Chun-Li was sitting on a chair with her hair disheveled. He held the kitchen knife in his hand. Crack! When Han Dong stepped into the hall, he took the initiative to close the wooden door. He adjusted his emotions and entered an acting state. Miss Chen, my name is Warren Nicholas. I want to talk to you about something. It's about Wang Po. Han Dong deliberately approached Chun-Li and stared at the kitchen knife in her hand. I'm different from them. I'm of mixed blood, and my mother is also from Jiuzhou. I was the one who suggested and organized this shoot. The purpose was to expose Wang Po's true colors and let her be punished by the law. But I can't accept it. Without conclusive evidence, she could only be imprisoned for a period of time, which was not enough to offset the consequences of her crimes. My mother was once killed by old Lady Wang. Han Dong's expression was on point as he spoke. Han Dong often used this kind of emotional disguise in gatherings with other teachers in the department. To be honest, Han Dong didn't like to get along with people, but because of the needs of work, he had to participate in various gatherings and social activities. He was an overseas Chinese. In order not to be ostracized by other teachers in the university, Han Dong had to pretend to be warm, polite, and friendly. Chun-Li's expression didn't change. You want her to disappear directly, right? Han Dong was surprised and pretended not to know that Chun-Li also hated Wang Po. Miss Chun-Li, you? Me? Do you think I really spent money to let Wang Po exorcise me? Haha, don't joke around. If it weren't for you, Wang Po and the others would have disappeared last night. That's better. Originally, I was still thinking about how to solve a group of college students who suddenly inserted themselves into the plan. Then, Han Dong tried to draw out Chun-Li's plan. Wang Po's fate was already sealed when she came here. You just need to leave with your friends and go back to wait for the news of her death. Han Dong immediately replied, No problem. Although Han Dong's acting was good, Chun-Li was also very vigilant. She didn't directly say the plan. In her heart, her brother Da Qing was the only person worthy of trust. Why do you want to help us? Han Dong shrugged and made a helpless expression. Help you? No. I'm just helping Wang Po and her husband get the retribution they deserve. The sooner the better. For a moment there was no sound in the hall. About 2 minutes passed. Chun-Li didn't see any flaws or falsehood in Han Dong's eyes. She put down the kitchen knife and said in a low voice, Okay. If everything goes well with the plan, my brother will make Wang Po's car have problems. They will still stay in the bungalow tonight. Tonight, a certain amount of laxatives will be added to the drinking water for Wang Po and her husband. My brother and I will do it in the outhouse. You only need to be responsible for watching your classmates. Don't let them leave the room in the middle of the night and don't go near the outhouse. The next day, you only need to explain to your companions that Wang Po and her husband returned to the village early in the morning because the car was repaired. My brother will rent a car to send you back to the city. Okay. Just as Han Dong was about to agree, Chun-Li suddenly rushed forward at an incredible speed. Her face suddenly came close to Han Dong. Their faces were almost touching. She whispered in Han Dong's ear. If one of you goes near the outhouse tonight and finds out about this, I'll have to kill you together with him. Do you understand? No problem. The negotiation was successful. Han Dong chose to help the siblings in this side mission. The reason was simple. They were determined to take revenge at all costs. However, they still had a certain amount of kindness and didn't want to bring disaster to this group of university students. They were definitely useful compared to Wang Pu and her husband, who went against their conscience and spread rumors everywhere. No matter how much Wang Pu and her husband helped them, even if it was to save the couple's lives, once their lives were in danger, the two of them would run away immediately. There was no value in building a good relationship with the couple. Just like that, not long after Han Dong returned to his room. When it was time, Wang Pu summoned everyone to room 6 and let Chun-Li, the possessed, lie on the bed. The returning ceremony began. Due to Han Dong's intervention, the movie's plot changed. Chun-Li, who was originally prepared to go crazy during the ceremony, chose to lie on the bed quietly and wait for the 3-hour returning ceremony to end. She forced herself to drink the talisman water made by Wang Pu. After that, she smiled and pretended that the evil in her body had been expelled. The ceremony was a success. Qing Qing's acting skills also surprised Han Dong. He knelt on the ground and hugged Wang Pu's thigh. With snot and tears, he called her benefactor and handed her the ceremony fees that he had prepared. After a short rest and lunch, Wang Pu and her husband didn't stay for long. Han Dong and the others couldn't leave the villa because of the restrictions. They said that they needed to wait until Chun-Li fully recovered and asked her how she felt during the returning ceremony before the filming could be considered complete. Just like that, Wang Pu and her husband left first. Of course, Qing Qing secretly tampered with the couple's van. In less than an hour, because the car broke down on the way, it was impossible to walk back on foot. Wang Pu and her husband had to return to the villa and call the repair team in town to rush over. The first step of the revenge plan succeeded. Time came to the second night of the abandoned farmhouse. Announcement: the events and characters in the Destiny space are digitized products and do not exist in reality. Chapter 15. The next night. Therefore, the drugged Wang Pu couple had fallen asleep and would definitely go to the bathroom in the middle of the night due to physical discomfort. According to the request, Han Dong only needed to be responsible for watching the team members and letting them stay in the dormitory all night. In fact, Han Dong didn't need to inform the team members at all. It was impossible for them to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, especially last night, when the bald Darien had already disappeared. If there was any physiological need, everyone would find a way to solve it in their own room. Han Dong only needed to have a good sleep, stay energetic, and live until tomorrow. However, the night was not calm. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps lingering in the corridor could be heard again. Han Dong woke up from his sleep with a start. With the light of the big red lantern, through the round glass window on the door, he saw a woman in red with messy black hair standing at the door. The newspaper that was originally stuck on the door had automatically fallen off. It was different from last night. The woman no longer walked around. Instead, she stood straight at the door and looked straight at Han Dong in the room. Under the messy black hair, a terrifying red lips could be vaguely seen. This wasn't Chun-Li knowing the revenge plan in advance. Chun-Li had to be hiding in the bathroom. It was impossible for her to appear on the second floor of the bungalow. The one standing at the door was naturally the evil spirit in this incident. Squeak, squeak, squeak. A sharp sound broke the silence of the night. The woman scratched the surface of the door with her sharp fingers. If it were anyone else, they would have been scared to the point of screaming. Even Han Dong, who had died once, couldn't be completely unafraid. Bean-sized beads of sweat dripped down his forehead. His back was already covered in cold sweat. However, Han Dong's expression didn't change. He just lay on the bed and stared at the woman at the door. Once the other party was about to break the door, Han Dong would immediately take out the faceless head's tentacle ability and try to fight back. Time passed by minute. The two just stared at each other. They slowly ignored the sound of fingernails scratching until the woman left. For a moment, the heavy pressure and sense of danger that had engulfed his entire body vanished without a trace. Han Dong's intuition told him that this evil spirit would probably not come to him again tonight. After sleeping for a full 5 hours, Han Dong was no longer sleepy after experiencing such a terrifying experience. Staring at the ceiling, Han Dong's brain began to habitually think. A strong man like Bald Darien didn't even have the chance to make a sound in front of the evil spirit woman. He just disappeared. Logically speaking, the evil spirit has the ability to kill all of us in the night. Why didn't she do that? Did he just want to scare us and toy with us? Waiting for the last moment to kill? Or is there a limit? Restrictions. When Han Dong thought of these 2 words, he immediately got up, took out the ballpoint pen and notebook he had bought, and hurriedly wrote them down. The current me is unable to understand the meaning of the existence of the destiny realm. But generally speaking, it should be used to filter ordinary people and strengthen the outstanding people in various aspects, or even give them supernatural abilities. The destiny realm will not give us a death trap to send us to our death. It will give us a chance to escape. This is why the evil spirit can't directly kill all of us. Since we are restricted by can only move within a 500-meter radius of the villa and can't stay in the same room at night, these restrictions. Then is it possible that this evil spirit is also restricted by the same restrictions? For example, can't enter our room by force? Or can it only attack people whose fear value has reached a certain level? Or can it only kill one person within a certain time limit? The possibility of restrictions is very high. When he was alive, Han Dong was also used to lying in bed to think about problems. The silent night and comfortable mattress often made him think of experimental methods and entry points that he would not have thought of sitting in the laboratory. If I can safely get through tonight, the time limit for this incident will only be half over. In the remaining 36 hours, I must try my best to find and verify the restrictions of the evil spirit. Once confirmed, the survival rate will greatly increase. Han Dong lay in bed the whole time until dawn. However, the situation that Han Dong encountered also happened to the other members of the team. Except for Edward, who was relatively calm. The other members were not so calm when they looked at the evil spirit through the glass window. 2 girls, one of them was screaming in the corner, and the other was squatting in the corner trembling. As for the paperboy Herbert, his reaction was a little different. He, who usually suppressed his fear, couldn't hold on at the moment and did an extremely irrational act. No. A fragile wooden door will definitely not be able to stop the evil spirit. I must escape. Unable to stop his calves from trembling, Herbert carried his backpack, opened the window and jumped down from the 2nd floor. His physical fitness was not bad, so he landed easily and took out a flashlight to observe the situation outside the bungalow. When Herbert jumped, the woman at the door stopped scratching the wooden door with her nails, and the corners of her mouth rose slightly. Go find the captain. He must have a way. The paperboy didn't dare to run around in the wilderness in the middle of the night. The only life-saving straw he could think of was Edward. Sticking close to the wall of the bungalow, Herbert carefully circled to the front yard of the bungalow. Through the light of the flashlight, he confirmed that the woman in front of his room had disappeared and that the corridor on the 2nd floor was empty. Tua tua, the sound of pork being cut. At the same time, he vaguely heard the sound of meat being cut from the direction of the outhouse dozens of meters away. In such a critical moment, it was easy for the brain to randomly connect the information it had obtained. Herbert's brain determined that someone had been killed in the outhouse. Taking this opportunity, he wanted to rush up the bungalow to meet up with the captain, who knew when he rushed up to the corner of the corridor, his body suddenly froze, and he forced himself to stop. At the corner, a woman stood facing the wall. This scene scared Herbert so much that his legs trembled, and his thoughts were in a mess, save, Just as the sound of S ended, 10 muddy fingernails covered Herbert's face, and an irresistible force dragged him back to a room on the second floor. The next day, just as Chun-Li and the Qing siblings finished making breakfast and everyone gathered in the hall on the first floor, when Qing brought the fried egg noodles over, he smiled and said, "The 4 of you slept well last night, right? Granny Wang and her husband's car has been repaired, and they left an hour ago. If there's anything else you want to film, we siblings will fully cooperate." When the word 4 came out of Qing's mouth, the members of the team trembled. Half of the time limit for the incident had passed. The initial 6-person team had been reduced to 4 people. Moreover, the second half of the incident might be even more dangerous. Chapter 16. During breakfast, Han Dong also said that he was not feeling well and carried the noodles with fried eggs back to his room. But in fact, it was because Han Dong had something to do. First, he analyzed the death of Herbert. He took out a pen and paper, placed them next to the noodles, and began to record and analyze while eating. Everyone experienced the evil spirit coming to their door last night. Of the 4 of us who survived, some left the bed, but none of us left the room. And the window of Herbert's room was open. Obviously, he chose to jump out of the window in panic and was targeted by the evil spirit. Restriction. My guess should be correct. At least last night, the evil spirit might be restricted by the restriction of not being able to enter the room. Or it might be restricted by the restriction of only killing 1 person, so it deliberately chose Herbert, who jumped out of the window. But I can't guarantee that this restriction will last forever. Perhaps as the time limit is shortened, the restriction of the evil spirit will become smaller and smaller. After all, with its current rate of killing people, there might still be 2 of us alive after this incident. Han Dong recorded all the details he could think of in a book and prepared to use the subsequent events to prove these conjectures. Secondly, the main purpose of returning to the room was, after the siblings succeeded last night, Han Dong received a system notification frowny face side event choice completed. At the end of this event, the probability of obtaining Card of Fate, Novice, will be increased by 10%. In addition, your intimacy with the important character, Fallen Witch Chun-Li, will be greatly increased, and your relationship with the important character Qing will be slightly increased. Greatly increased. This was the harvest Han Dong obtained after he took the initiative to contact Chun-Li yesterday and offered to help. During breakfast, Han Dong secretly slipped a note to Chun-Li, asking her to pretend that she was not feeling well and go upstairs to have a private conversation. In the face of life and death, a temporary team of strangers is not worth trusting. The only thing I can completely trust is the people involved. About 5 minutes later, Chun-Li also went upstairs with a bowl of noodles. "Come in." When Han Dong closed the door, he deliberately used newspapers to seal the glass window. "Thank you." For a moment, Chun-Li, who had a terrifying appearance and caused the members of the team to mistakenly think that she was possessed by an evil spirit, actually lost control of her emotions and burst into tears the moment she was alone with Han Dong. The hatred that had accumulated over the years had been completely vented. "I'm fine now." Han Dong stepped forward and comforted Chun-Li, trying his best to increase their intimacy to the maximum. As for Wang Pu and her husband who were killed, Han Dong was not moved at all. In Han Dong's eyes, in the Destiny space, which was similar to a game's setting, all the characters were game NPCs, and not real people. The various intimacy levels and plot settings further confirmed this point. Just as Han Dong finished comforting him, the system's voice sounded again. Intimacy level increased. Your relationship with the possessed Chun-Li has increased to best friend. Note: intimacy level can be further increased. Chun-Li slowly stopped sobbing and turned to look at Han Dong in front of her. "Thank you. If you want to continue filming, I will also play along." "No need." Miss Chun-Li, Filming is just a small matter. I asked you to come to my room because there's something very important that I need your help with. What is it? Han Dong said with a serious face. It's something that concerns my life and only you can help me. If their relationship had not reached the level of best friend, Han Dong would not dare to talk about his situation like this. After a brief explanation, Chun-Li, who was originally carrying a bowl of noodles upstairs, suddenly took out a kitchen knife from nowhere. It gave people the feeling that she could use a kitchen knife at any time. Instantly, a murderous aura spread out, and even the temperature in the room dropped by 2 degrees. At this moment, even Han Dong was doubting whether this Chun-Li was she a human or a ghost. I will definitely help you. Just as Chun-Li was about to say this, buzz. A ringing sound reverberated in the room, followed by a low voice in his head. It was completely different from the notification in the Destiny space. A special life form has been detected that is closely related to the host. If the target is willing, perfect containment can be performed. Special life form? As expected, Miss Chun-Li is not an ordinary person. Han Dong was shocked. A great opportunity was in front of him. If he really grasped it, not only would he be able to deepen his understanding of the portable prison, but he would also have a strong and powerful helper. This was crucial for Han Dong, who had a weak body. Chun-Li's setting in the movie was originally a country girl who fell into the abyss of revenge because of her mother's death. In order to take revenge, she was even prepared to be imprisoned and sentenced to death. Her life goal has been achieved, and she has little concern for the world. Now is the perfect opportunity to contain her. Hesitation would lead to failure. Portable prison, activate. The teleportation process was completed in an instant, but the state of the two people was completely different. Han Dong was in the prison corridor, while Chun-Li appeared directly in the only cell. What happened next left Han Dong dumbfounded. Those speckled tentacles lurking in the cracks of the stone wall, when sensing the entry of foreign objects, grew wildly one by one. They wrapped around Chun-Li's hands and feet. There was also a tentacle that ignored the skull and penetrated the back of Chun-Li's head. Analyzing information related to the anomaly, because the tentacle penetrated the back of her head, Chun-Li was in a strange state, and her eyeballs moved back and forth. When Han Dong saw this scene, his expression was not very good. In fact, he wanted Chun-Li to take the initiative to choose whether she was willing to follow him to the new world, and not be forcibly contained like this. According to the system prompt, Chun-Li herself should be willing. I hope this containment method won't cause her any harm. After waiting for about 5 minutes, information analysis completed. Corrupted Chun-Li containment method. Perfect containment, high intimacy, anomaly is willing to accept the containment ritual. Type, corrupted in a living state, due to extreme negative emotions nourishing a physical evil aura, coupled with long-term residence in an area with heavy negative energy, it causes a mild corruption of the individual. Combat rating, E+ evolution path, evil refining abilities 1. Evil change, fixed increase in all basic attribute. 2. Kitchen knife, origin weapon. No wonder the system gave Chun-Li the prefix corrupted. She really fell into the evil path due to hatred. When the analysis was completed, the tentacles binding Chun-Li were automatically released and retracted into the wall. At the same time, an inconspicuous dark mark was left on Chun-Li's neck. It needed to be carefully examined. The mark was faceless human face with 8 curved tentacles around it. Chapter 17. Portable Prison, Contained Creatures. 1/2 Maximum Value. Before the prison expands or voluntarily releases the existing contained creatures, the containment ability cannot be activated. To a certain extent, the contained creatures obey the orders given by the host. However, for some orders that go against their own beliefs, the contained creatures will show strong resistance and lower their mood. Please pay attention to the mood of the contained creatures. If their mood is lower than good for a long time, there may be a rebellion or even a containment failure. The system notification ended. Chun-Li opened her eyes in the cell. He thought that Chun-Li would be panicked because she was in a cell. Unexpectedly, she had a smile on her face. She didn't reject this cold and dark prison at all. When the tentacles were attached to the back of her head, a subconscious feeling of home was implanted in her. This made Chun-Li feel like she had returned home while she was in prison. In addition, there was another important change. That was the look in Chun-Li's brown eyes. In addition to the best friend, there seemed to be an additional master and servant relationship. Han Dong sincerely said, "Thank you for trusting me. After my mother was killed, my only goal in life was revenge. My brother Daqing has his own family matters. After this matter is over, he can go live his own life. I have nothing to worry about, and I don't want to be a burden to him. Leaving with you is actually a good thing." Chun-Li calmly accepted all of this. "Then I'll leave the rest to you. When everything is over, I'll take you to a new world." "Okay." After returning to the bungalow, Chun-Li pretended to be weak. She supported herself against the wall and returned to her room sick. Han Dong also left the room and prepared to go down to meet up with the team. Unexpectedly, as soon as he went out, he bumped into Edward, who had curly blonde hair. Edward asked with concern, "Friend Nicholas, are you okay?" "It's just that I didn't sleep well last night, and Herbert also got into trouble. Nervousness and lack of sleep made me a little weak. After breakfast, I feel a lot better. There shouldn't be any danger during the day. Why don't you rest in your room?" Edward was about to turn around and leave when he seemed to have thought of something. However, this series of movements was slightly deliberate. "All right. Friend Nicholas, when I was going up the stairs, I just happened to see Chun-Li come out of your room. Counting the time she went up the stairs, she should have stayed with you for about 20 minutes, right? You've been alone with this possessed person for such a long time, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Edward suddenly had no intention to leave. Instead, he took the initiative to enter Han Dong's room and close the door behind him. "My friend Nicholas, I hope that you can tell me what happened in the past 20 minutes, the content of your conversation, and your thoughts." The evil spirit in this incident was highly likely to be Chun-Li, or perhaps the evil spirit was possessing Chun-Li's body and would only appear at night. "Information about her is very important to us." "Yes." Han Dong had already thought of an excuse. He said that Chun-Li came to the second floor to check on his health. After all, Han Dong and the others were part of the filming crew and helped during the exorcism process. After that, the two of them sat down to eat noodles and talked about some life matters. Edward looked puzzled. "That's it?" "Yes, but—" Han Dong seemed to have recalled some terrifying details. "But what?" Han Dong pretended to be serious. "During the time that Chun-Li stayed in my room, the temperature dropped a lot. Also, during the conversation, when she talked about her previous experience of being possessed, she took out a kitchen knife from somewhere. She scared me quite a bit. However, she was just purely emotional and did not do anything dangerous." Edward used his mechanical prosthesis that was wearing a white glove to touch his chin as if he was recalling something. Kitchen knife? Indeed, it seems that this Chun-Li likes kitchen knives very much and would carry them with her at all times. "Nicholas, thank you for sharing this important information. As the captain, I will do my best to help you survive. Let me tell you a piece of news." "What is it?" Han Dong looked curious. "According to the information that my returnee friend revealed, the average newbie mission is a survival event. It can be as short as 1 day or as long as half a month. However, no matter how long you are required to survive, the event will not progress very quickly in the early stages, deliberately giving the participants a sense of relaxation. Often, in the last period, the event will suddenly speed up, and even some unimaginable events will occur. If the teams of more than 10 people cooperate well, they can all survive in the early stages. but they will all die in the last few hours. This sudden change is called speed shift by my friend and the knight. Han Dong looked surprised. Captain, are you saying the evil spirit may go on a killing spree in the last few hours? Yes, I estimate that speed shift will begin in the last half of the day. Today we will still work and rest in our rooms as usual. Wait until tomorrow at 6 o'clock, everyone will gather. I will find a way to keep everyone alive. Thank you, Captain. You're welcome. You should rest in your room. Since you were fine when you were alone with Chun-Li for 20 minutes, it means that there shouldn't be any danger today. Watching Edward leave, Han Dong wrote down speed shift and Edward's name in his notebook. Edward Murray. This person's origin is by no means simple. Moreover, he is obviously well prepared for this event. He should know the details hidden in the destiny space like the back of his hand. However, he only told me the law of the development of the event. He didn't tell me the real restrictions at all. It's necessary to pay attention to this person. As for the so-called speed shift, it's likely that I'm guessing that in the later stages of the event, the restrictions on the evil spirit will be greatly weakened or completely removed. The third day, Han Dong stayed in his room almost all day without going out. The reason was that he was not feeling well, and Captain Edward allowed it. Even lunch and dinner would be personally served by Chun-Li. Han Dong was thinking all day. Everything was normal. As Edward said, speed shift would happen at the moment when everyone slightly relaxed their vigilance. Even a team of more than 10 people would die in the last few hours. It was evening. After dinner, Han Dong took the opportunity to bring the rice bowl to the first floor and left the room for the first time. Before the final sunset, he went to the outhouse to solve his physiological problem. Of course, the main purpose was to secretly meet with Chun-Li. When he came to the back of the outhouse, although he was mentally prepared in advance, he was still a little surprised. Chun-Li, with disheveled hair and dressed in red, was holding a kitchen knife. Half of her body was hidden behind a tree. Do as I said. Tonight, you and your brother will take action. Whether I can survive or not depends on your performance. Okay. Han Dong praised her before leaving. You're dressed better than I planned. You almost scared me. Chapter 18. Day 3 at night. Han Dong returned to his room after meeting the bewitched Chun-Li at dusk. The other members of the team also returned to their rooms before 11 o'clock. The power was still cut off at 11 o'clock at night. Only the big red lantern was still lit. This would be the last night of this incident. The two girls in the team took out all the candles in their backpacks and lit them in every corner of the room, dispelling the fear in their hearts through the light. As for Edward, who was familiar with the hidden rules, he fell asleep peacefully after checking the steam prosthetic limb. Han Dong was also resting, even though he had rested all day during the day. The third night was different. He was no longer awakened by the footsteps wandering in the corridor. Han Dong actually woke up naturally. The moment he opened his eyes, Han Dong quickly turned his head to look at the clockwork device on his wrist. 9 hours left before the end of the incident. Strange. Is there a problem with the time or the environment? Outside the window, the full moon was in the sky. It was dark. No matter how one looked at it, it was still night. However, the standard time for Han Dong and the others to arrive at the villa was 6 o'clock in the evening. Then, the time limit should end at 6 o'clock in the evening 3 days later. Going back 9 hours, the current time should be 9 o'clock in the morning. But there was no sign of dawn outside the window. Could it be that Edward's so-called speed change has already begun? At this moment, knock, knock, knock. Han Dong's bedroom door was knocked continuously. Standing outside the door was a flustered Edward Murray and 2 women with dark circles under their eyes. At least it meant that no one was killed last night. Friend Nicholas, it's good that you're okay. The speed change I told you about yesterday should have arrived. Han Dong looked at a loss and asked anxiously, Captain, what should we do? Edward suggested, let's meet up with the people involved in the incident first. Maybe we can get help from them. Rumor has it that the former Black Rose Knight commander was able to bring a large number of rookies out of the Destiny space alive. One of them was with the help of the people involved in the incident. Okay. The four of them walked together, with Edward leading the way. Unfortunately, things changed beyond Edward's expectations. Creak. The wooden door of the hall on the first floor was pushed open. When everyone's flashlights illuminated the hall, Monica, the blonde girl in the team, was so scared that she fell to the ground. Even Captain Edward, who was always calm, had some sweat on his forehead. The believer, Ackerman, knelt on the ground, grabbed the cross, and chanted some strange scriptures in an attempt to dispel the fear in his heart. The hall was indeed the same as it was in the mornings of the past. The siblings had prepared breakfast and were waiting for everyone to eat. However, the siblings had turned into paper dolls today. They were the paper dolls used for the return to human beings ceremony, a man and a woman, and the workmanship was rough. However, in the eyes of the four of them, they were Chun-Li and Da-Ching. As for breakfast, there were 6 bowls of fragrant rice on the table. Even Han Dong was shocked by this strange scene, thinking that something had really happened to Chun-Li and her brother. However, through the prison connection, he knew that Chun-Li was still alive and was not the paper doll in front of him. Ah! Suddenly, a scream came out of Ackerman's mouth. In the direction her flashlight was shining, a van that belonged to Granny Wang and her husband was parked on the path outside the bungalow. Although Han Dong knew that Granny Wang and her husband had been killed, the rest of the team did not know. Including Edward, they all thought that Granny Wang and her husband had returned on their own after the return to human beings ceremony was successful. Edward led the team and slowly approached the somewhat rough van. When they got closer, they saw that it was a large paper hearse. Granny Wang and her husband, who were also paper dolls, were sitting on the hearse. The paper dolls' faces were covered with red stickers, forming a strange smile. Is there no way out? There's no way to get help from the people involved. Just as Edward was deep in thought, whoosh! The few large red lanterns hanging on the corridor were all extinguished. The bungalow that could be used as a light source was completely plunged into darkness. Everyone reflexively shone their flashlights on the corridor on the second floor of the building. Creak! In the silent night, the sound of the old wooden door opening was particularly crisp. Room 6. It was also from Chun-Li's room. A woman with black hair covering her face slowly walked out. She stood quietly in the corridor and stared at the team members beside the hearse through her black hair. The 2 messages Chun-Li is an evil spirit and the bungalow cannot be returned were deeply imprinted in Edward's mind. Edward steadied his mind and took out the 500-meter map drawn by the paperboy a few days ago. He quickly formulated a response plan. The situation is worse than I imagined. Only death awaits us if we return to the bungalow. The only way to survive now is to use the 500-meter radius of movement to avoid the evil spirit's pursuit. The 4 of us will walk together. Once we encounter the evil spirit, we will all die. I suggest that we split into 2 groups and act separately. This will increase the survival rate of some of us. I'm sorry, my ability is limited. I might not be able to bring everyone out of this alive. I'll team up with you. The blonde, Monica, was bound to stick to this life-saving straw. In her eyes, Nicholas, who was weak and rested in his room every day, and Ackerman, who only knew how to pray, did not deserve to live at all. At this time, the woman in red standing in the corridor on the second floor had already begun to move. There was no discussion on how to split up. Then let's split up like this. I'll team up with Miss Ackerman, Han Dong said bitterly. Edward smiled knowingly and handed Han Dong a map. Everyone will split up and escape. You and Ackerman will escape to the mountain in the south. You must survive. Edward seemed to be concerned, but he pointed out the most difficult path for Han Dong to take. Han Dong and Akumen's bodies were not good to begin with. If they escaped towards the mountain, their stamina would be greatly depleted. Once they encountered the evil spirit, they would not even have the chance to escape. However, Han Dong did not object. "Let's escape. I hope we can meet again in the Holy City." They split into 2 teams and fled towards the north and south. Edward fled downhill. At the same time, there was an abandoned building at the foot of the mountain where they could hide. After the team members fled, Chun-Li, who slowly walked to the first floor of the bungalow, revealed a strange smile. At this time, her younger brother, Da-Ching, who was holding an oil lamp, walked over from the direction of the outhouse. "Sister, are we really going to help that foreigner who can speak the Kyushu language? We don't need to take the risk." "Help." Chun-Li, whose black hair was scattered, had entered a state of possessed. Just one word scared her younger brother so much that his body trembled. He did not dare to have any objections. That's right. Although the setting of the paper doll had nothing to do with Han Dong, Chun-Li's appearance was arranged by Han Dong. Chapter 19. This body is really uncomfortable. I've rested for such a long time without any delay in sleeping. How long have we been walking? I can clearly feel that my body can't take it anymore. Countdown, 8 hours. Stepping on the mountain road, Han Dong needed to rest for a few seconds almost every 5 steps. The oxygen in his lungs was completely insufficient, and his 2 legs were slightly trembling due to the lack of exercise and the lack of necessary vitamin. As for the believer Akumen, her physical condition was actually better than Han Dong's. She held the cross tightly the whole time, her dark circles were thick, and there was almost no fire of hope in her eyes. She was always by Han Dong's side. Although Han Dong's body didn't seem to have much value, Han Dong found a building sign on the map. "There should be a farmhouse in front. Let's go in and hide?" After a while, the flashlight shone on a stone brick house built halfway up the mountain. It was a single-story design, and there were many cracks on the wall. It was obviously abandoned for a long time. Han Dong really couldn't walk anymore. If he continued like this, his body might completely collapse. No matter how old the building was, he could only go in and rest. Just as he walked into the abandoned building, boom! A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, followed by rolling thunder. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The rain poured down. Fortunately, the roof tiles were tightly laid and there were no leaks. Otherwise, if Han Dong's body was drenched in the rain, he might catch a cold and fall sick in the last few hours. Then everything would be over. The 2 of them sat against the wall in the hall. Han Dong quickly took out some high-calorie food from his backpack and a bottle of radix isatitis powder that he prepared beforehand to replenish his energy and prevent himself from falling sick. Compared to Han Dong, Akumen, who was sitting opposite him, was calmer. She didn't eat anything, nor did she express any emotions. She just held the cross and stared blankly at the front. The 2 of them just sat there quietly, listening to the sound of the heavy rain washing the tiles for about 5 minutes. Suddenly, Akumen spoke. "Do you know? The basement of the church is very similar to here, dark and damp. Every day after I finish my volunteer work, the priest would ask me to stay down there for a while." Han Dong smelled something strange. "Although I don't want to, there's nothing I can do about it. If I don't take the money back, my father will beat me, and it will be even more painful than the priest. I have to be obedient. As long as I am obedient, I will take the money back." The more Akumen spoke, the more agitated she became. She even began to scratch the ground with her fingernails. "Do you know? I could have become an official employee of the church if I had persevered for a few more months. I could have gotten a fixed salary every month. Being able to interact with more and more people, my life will get back on track. It just had to be at this time. My father didn't allow me to continue working at the church. He owed too much money and needed to sell me to pay off his debt. No. I can't accept this. I got rid of my father, and since I was homeless, I could only go to the church to seek help from a priest. But the priest, who had always been good to me, changed his expression and didn't want me to work in the church. He even wanted to take me away. I really don't want it to be like this. I really just want a simple life. Can you understand how I feel? For a moment. Crack, crack, crack. Strange sounds of joints twisting came from Akaman's body. She changed from a sitting position to a crawling position. Han Dong immediately used the prison to establish a connection with Chun-Li. He sent her an extremely important message. Whether or not she could succeed would determine whether or not Han Dong could survive. Whoosh! Akaman, who was in a crawling position, had her black hair fluttering in the air. Han Dong's guess was completely correct. The real evil spirit was among the 6 people. Her speed was so fast that Han Dong couldn't see her clearly. Her 10 fingers were already on Han Dong's cheek. The familiar feeling of death. It was very similar to the moment when he was lying on the hospital bed with respiratory failure. But this time, his death might be a little faster. Wait, can you let me end it myself? My body doesn't have long to live anyway. As Han Dong said this, he took out a short knife that he had prepared earlier and stopped at his neck. Such words and actions made the evil spirit, Akaman, stop what she was doing. Han Dong's performance was completely different from the previous 2 people. In Han Dong's eyes, she couldn't see the fear that others had before death. Along the way, she saw the state of Han Dong's body. Such a weak person couldn't possibly escape, let alone survive. In Akaman's eyes, this young man named Nicholas suddenly became interesting. I'll give you 1 minute. Han Dong showed a helpless smile. Thank you. Before I die, I have a question. Why didn't you just kill most of us on the first night? After all, the memories of the dead will be deleted from the memories of the people involved. There's no disadvantage for you, right? As Han Dong asked, the knife in his hand had already cut into her flesh. Akaman didn't have any vigilance. Because she was more interested in Han Dong and concluded that this person couldn't possibly survive, she answered his question before death. In the first few days I could only kill 1 person per day. And I can only do it at night. Only in the last 12 hours of this game, this mandatory requirement will gradually decrease. Do you understand? In the last few hours I will kill all of you. Don't worry, someone will come to accompany you in a while. Han Dong's guess was confirmed again. The restriction really existed. Thank you. Han Dong didn't hesitate too much. The blade cut across the neck. The depth of the cut was enough to kill. Such a weak body couldn't withstand such a heavy injury. Her eyes gradually lost their luster, and she died leaning against the wall. Not long after, Akaman received a system prompt unique to it. Due to the death of the survivor, the cooldown reset to 4 hours. Current number of survivors, 2. As a result, Akaman didn't stay any longer. Like a spider, it crawled out of the abandoned house and quickly chased down the mountain where the 2 Edward fled. Down the mountain. In the abandoned farmhouse courtyard. The blonde Monica opened her eyes wide, full of resentment, looking at the indifferent captain in front of her, Edward. Her abdomen had been penetrated by a steam arm. Why? Monica didn't expect that she wasn't killed by the evil spirit, but by the life-saving straw she wanted to rely on. Because of her. Edward glanced sideways at the woman in red standing quietly in the woods outside the farmhouse. You lowly civilians, from the moment you entered the Destiny realm, you were destined to become bait. The meaning of your existence is just to buy time for me. Edward's image of a good person collapsed instantly. Following Monica's collapse, the woman in red who had been pacing around the forest also left. Seeing this scene, Edward breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't expect my luck to be so bad. The evil spirit actually chased after me first. I must immediately meet up with the weakest duo and continue to use their time. After a short rest, Edward immediately went up the mountain in the opposite direction. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.